Draco Malfoy and the Dark Lord's Diary. By Draco we'll hear about this. Chapter 1. Horrible Summer Holidays and Illegally Flying Cars. Draco had been home for 6 weeks, and it was more than enough time to decide that he hated the summer holidays. No, perhaps hate was too weak a word. He hated Theodore Nott. He hated black pudding. He detested summer holidays. It all began when he came home and got yelled at by his father for every offence imaginable. His choice of friends, which was never going to change, was the first issue. Then there was the incident where he broke about 100 school rules by entering a forbidden corridor with those friends. They were trying to rescue an invaluable alchemic product from the hands of a deranged maniac his father had used to follow. Fair enough, he might have deserved some yelling for that, but not for the same reasons his father had given. His marks were another point of contention. They were not as perfect as those of a mudblood, even though his marks were the second best in his entire year, and Hermione Granger was, after all, a genius. In general, he was being scolded for being a terrible disappointment as a son. As a consequence, his father decided to confine him to the manor until it was time to go back to school. No meeting friends, no watching Quidditch matches, and no shopping at Diagon Alley with his mother. Draco was unsure what his father hoped to achieve with this punishment. Did he think that 2 months at the manor with only his parents and the house elves for company would reform him into the proper pureblood heir he believed him to be? If so, he was terribly mistaken. His mother, needless to say, was not impressed with his father's attitude. It took only 2 days after Draco's return from school for them to break into a huge fight. Family heirlooms were smashed against walls, most of them from his father's side of the family. Their voices carried all the way to Draco's bedroom, despite the stairway, and about 10 rooms separating him from the danger zone. Ever since that day, his summer had only gotten worse. Draco's parents had been terribly cold with each other. They were no longer fighting. Instead, they treated each other with a frozen politeness that made Draco shudder every time he witnessed it. He was grateful that his mother sided with him rather than her husband. But living in a house that felt like a social icebox was not pleasant. Then again, being the least popular student in Slytherin, he was somewhat used to it. The worst part, far worse than anything happening at home, was that he hadn't heard from Harry all summer. Draco didn't understand why. Hermione wrote to him weekly, and even Weasley had managed to correspond. But there wasn't so much as a note from Harry. He wasn't the only one who hadn't heard from him. Harry had treated both Hermione and Weasley with the same silence, which left Draco more than a little suspicious. No, not just suspicious. He was bloody worried, that's what he was. Draco knew that Harry was not a welcome guest at his aunt and uncle's house. It didn't take much imagination to picture how he was treated, considering the thoughtless comments Harry had made over the past year. The longer he went without news from Harry, the more scared he became for his friend's well-being. It had gotten to the point where he was discussing an intervention with Weasley, who, for all his faults, was just as worried as Draco. His fears peaked on the day of Harry's birthday, when his father returned with the news that Harry had received an official warning from the Ministry of Magic for performing a hovering charm at his Muggle relative's house. Draco tuned out the lecture that followed about his choice of friends, and instead focused on his growing panic. Harry might not care much for the rules, but he wouldn't be reckless enough to risk expulsion from school unless it was a matter of life or death. And with those, Draco thought uneasily, they'd had enough experience. Draco had plenty of experience by now. That night he wrote to Weasley, insisting they needed to take action to find out if Harry was okay. Weasley agreed, assuring him he was trying to convince his parents to check on Harry. If they refused, he was working on a backup plan with the twins. Draco was unsure if that reassured him. Fred and George Weasley were infamous for causing chaos at Hogwarts, and the last thing Harry needed was more trouble. Draco also tried to talk to his mother about his worries. While she listened, she refused to get involved. "What do you expect me to do, darling?" she sighed. "Show up at his Muggle relative's house and demand to see the boy? They'll call the Muggle auras on me, and your father would have my head." "No, dear, you will have to wait until term starts. You will see him then, I'm sure." Thankfully, Draco did not have to wait long. 4 days after Harry's birthday, he finally received a letter carried by Hedwig. The snowy owl seemed thrilled to see him. Draco could have kissed her as she dropped the letter into his hands, hooting in triumph before joining Aquila on his perch. He had never been so eager to open a letter and practically tore into the envelope. "Dear Draco," it read. "Sorry for making you worry. My uncle put a lock on Hedwig's cage, so I couldn't contact you. I never received any of your letters either. Believe it or not, a house elf showed up at the Dursleys' house on my birthday, asking me to stay away from Hogwarts. He said there was a plot to make most terrible things happen, and that I would be in mortal danger if I returned." Draco read that sentence over twice before he closed his eyes and let out an agonized groan. "Why does the freaky stuff always happen to you?" He moaned into the room. "That elf also intercepted all the letters from you guys. Apparently, he thought that if I felt like no one was missing me, I wouldn't want to go back. He also performed the hovering charm in the living room, dropping pudding all over the wife of an important business partner of my uncle in an attempt to get me locked away. He succeeded. Ron, Fred, and George broke me out of there, and I'm now with the Weasleys." "Broke me out?" Draco repeated, making a face as he looked over at Hedwig. "Do I want to know?" She let out a high screech, which Draco interpreted as a no. "Anyway, I'm sorry if I scared you. I am fine now. How about you? Has your father been giving you a rough time? Hope to hear from you soon, Harry. P.S. We're meeting Hermione at Diagon Alley on the 19th. Maybe you could come too." Draco let himself drop onto his bed, smiling as he reread the letter. Relief settled in his stomach. The whole house elf story sounded very ominous, but he would get the details when he saw Harry face to face. For now, the other boys seemed safe and sound, and that was enough for Draco. Now he just needed to talk his mother into sneaking him out to Diagon Alley on the 19th. But he was sure they would find a way. "Remember," his mother said tersely as they walked out onto the shopping street, and Draco craned his neck for any sign of his friends. "We need to be home before your father returns from wherever he is today. If he finds out, I'll let you go to meet Potter, Weasley, and Granger." "I know, Mother," Draco waved her off. "It will be fine. We'll just stay for a couple of hours. He'll never know I was gone." "He'd better not," she muttered. She let the subject drop and instead said, "I'll work my way down your list of school supplies. We'll meet back at the Leaky." "Cauldron at 4 o'clock the latest, understood?" "Yes, Mother," Draco replied, absent-mindedly, still scanning for a messy bob of black hair or, alternatively, a lot of ginger. He spotted them about 5 minutes later as they strolled out of Gringotts. He was so happy to see them that he pulled both Harry and Hermione into a hug, which felt very unmanly and un-Malfoy-like, but he was grinning too widely to feel embarrassed. After separating from the others, Mr. Weasley took Hermione's parents out for a drink. Mrs. Weasley went to buy robes with her daughter, and the brothers scattered somewhere, which Draco couldn't care less about, as they made their way to Florian Fortescue's to get some ice cream. They chatted excitedly about this and that when Harry suddenly turned to Draco and announced, "By the way, Draco, I saw your father earlier at Borgin and Burke's." Draco froze mid-step, staring at Harry incredulously, a sinking feeling in his stomach. "You mean he's here?" he asked, his voice edged with concern. "At Diagon Alley?" "Well, I'm not sure he still is," Harry shrugged, frowning at Draco's reaction. "And it was Nocturne Alley in the first place, so—" Draco could have asked what Harry had been doing in Nocturne Alley, but he was too shaken by the news of his father's proximity to question his friend. "Why?" Harry asked. "What's wrong?" "He doesn't exactly know I'm here," Draco confessed with a sigh. "Mother snuck me out behind his back. He would never have allowed me to meet up with you, so if he happens to see me here—" "He's probably gone," Harry said, trying to calm him. "He was trying to sell dark artifacts that could incriminate him. He probably didn't linger." "Let's hope you're right," Draco muttered. "And let's hope he doesn't go home to find Mother and me gone," he thought to himself. "Cheer up," Harry said with a smile as he elbowed Draco. "Let's buy some ice cream, and then you can tell me about your summer." "Not much to tell," Draco replied with a snort. I'd much rather hear about yours. What was that about the elf?" Harry launched into the story of how the elf had appeared in his room and what exactly he had said. By the time he finished, they had finished their ice cream and arrived at Gamble and James's joke shop. "What was he talking about, though?" Draco frowned. "What kind of danger is there supposed to be waiting at Hogwarts? Dumbledore is not hiding anything new at the school, is he?" "He'd better not," Hermione added, her eyes wide. "I'm telling you, Nott was just playing a joke on him," Ron said with a shrug. "Nott?" Draco repeated, frowning. "Ron thinks he sent the elf to keep me from going back to school," Harry explained. It might be his idea of a joke," Draco conceded, his frown deepening. "But you said the elf acted like he was there against instructions, didn't you?" "Well, yes," Harry nodded. "But it seems like they can't act against instructions, so—" "Oh, they can, if they feel strongly about something," Draco corrected. "Our elves are much more loyal to my mother than my father, for example, and they will go against his direct orders if it's about her, or sometimes me." Their conversation was interrupted when they ran into the twins and their Gryffindor friend at the fireworks section of the shop, and Draco got distracted from continuing the discussion. Later, as they made their way to Flourish and Blots, the place was bursting with people. Gilderoy Lockhart was there to sign his new book, and Draco groaned out loud, just as Hermione squealed. "We can actually meet him. I mean, he's written almost the whole book list." "Oh, come off it, Hermione," Draco rolled his eyes. "He's a phony wannabe celebrity." "What do you mean? Wannabe?" Hermione replied frostily. "He's very famous, isn't he? His books are bestsellers." "Just because all the witches think he's pretty," Draco scoffed. He received a snort of amusement from Weasley in response. "He's an airhead, Hermione. I'm telling you." "Don't say that too loudly," Weasley warned as they entered the shop. "None fancies him." Draco raised his eyebrows at him. In that rare moment, they seemed to share a thought, as Weasley rolled his eyes in agreement. They joined the Weasleys and the Grangers, who were standing in the crowd. Both Hermione and Mrs. Weasley eagerly stretched to get a glimpse of Lockhart. Draco's impression of the best-selling author was only solidified by the events of the next half hour. Lockhart was just as embarrassingly self-absorbed and attention-seeking as Draco had always assumed. He even managed to spot Harry in the crowd and exploit his friend's fame for publicity. Draco knew he had been sneering hard throughout the impromptu photo session that Harry had been roped into. His mother would have snapped at him to assume some composure, but he could not help himself. The guy was unbearable. To make matters worse, Lockhart had pompously announced before releasing Harry that he would be their new defense against the dark arts teacher. Bloody brilliant. What happened next, though, took the cake. Harry was just shoving the books Lockhart had gifted him into the cauldron that Weasley's little sister was holding, when a steely voice made them turn around in surprise and dread for Draco. "Harry Potter, what a pleasure to finally meet you, after I've heard so much about you." There, towering over them, with a polite elegance that only he could manage, was Draco's father. Draco had to fight the urge to run and hide among the crowd. Draco knew he had been caught, and there was no way to deny it. Instead, he stood a little taller, trying to project stubborn defiance. He felt the other's eyes shifting between him and his father, but he refused to meet their gaze, keeping his focus locked on his father. "And look who we have here," his father said, his voice low and dangerous. "Fancy meeting you like this, Draco." Draco stayed silent, his lips tightening. A moment of tense silence passed before Mr. Weasley appeared behind them, struggling to get through with the twins in tow. "What are you doing here?" he asked mildly, seemingly unaware of Draco's father. "It's mad in here. Let's go outside." "Well, well, well, Arthur Weasley," Draco's father sneered, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was a smile devoid of warmth, filled instead with pure malice. At that moment, Mr. Weasley looked up at him, and his posture changed entirely. Tension filled the air as he held himself differently, his expression turning almost as cold as Draco's father's. "Lucius," he said, nodding once in greeting. "Busy time at the ministry, I hear," Draco's father drawled. his eyes narrowing slightly, a sign that an insult was coming. "All those raids? I hope they're paying you overtime." He reached for one of the books from the Weasley girls' cauldron. It was an old, battered book, clearly second-hand, and he raised his eyebrows in distaste as he examined it. "Obviously not," he answered his own question. "Dear me, what's the use of being a disgrace to the name of wizard if they don't even pay you well for it?" "Father," Draco hissed, anger and humiliation flooding through him. "Stop! Don't you dare take that tone with me," his father replied. "Draco," his father snapped, giving him a furious sideways glance. "You're in enough trouble as it is. Don't make it worse by talking back to me." "What are you going to do? Ground me even more?" Draco rolled his eyes, his anger giving him courage. "Throw me in the dungeons?" "I would watch my words if I were you, son," his father said through clenched teeth. "I have close ties to the headmaster of Durmstrang, you know. It's not too late to take you out of Hogwarts." Draco paled at that, his fingers curling into a fist. "Mother wouldn't let you," he replied simply. "Your mother is much too soft with you," his father retorted coldly, his gaze shifting from Draco to Weasley, and finally settling on Hermione, his nose wrinkling in obvious distaste. "Clearly," he emphasized. With a dramatic gesture, he dropped the book he was holding back into the cauldron and turned back to his son. "We're going home," he ordered. "I'm here with Mother," Draco protested. "I can't just disappear, she'll—" "We'll find her and go home together," his father interrupted with finality. Draco knew he had no chance of winning this argument. "And then we'll have a good long talk about the company you keep." Draco took a deep breath, glaring back with all the loathing he felt at that moment before turning to his friends. Hermione looked slightly shaky, but she was trying to smile at Draco when their eyes met. Weasley looked furious, his face as red as his father's, as they both stared up at Lucius Malfoy in barely contained rage. Harry appeared ready to grab Draco's arm and refused to let him leave. "I'll see you on the train," Draco muttered, reluctantly following his father out of the shop. Draco had never seen his father this furious. Their shouting match lasted for almost an hour, only interrupted occasionally by his mother's sharp comments directed at her husband. Draco had been correct when he said his mother would not allow him to be sent to school halfway across Europe. It was a close call. Only the threat of her taking Draco away and leaving the manor shut down his father's argument completely. To say that the rest of Draco's summer holidays were even more hellish than they already had been would be an understatement. Before his trip to Diagon Alley, his father had mainly ignored him. Now he actively sought him out. He punished Draco by giving him work. He was made to read books and essays on blood purity and summarize them for his father afterward. It was needless to say that these conversations led to new fights each time. His father might have had the authority to punish him, but Draco was done letting himself be told what to believe. He refused to hold back his displeasure regarding his father's bigoted ideas. Whenever his father had enough of what he called Draco's cheek, he sent him to do physical labor supervised by Dobby, the house elf he used as his personal servant. Draco had polished more family heirlooms and dusted portraits of their horrific ancestors than he could count. One time, when he had been especially exhausted, he asked Dobby to finish the job for him and not tell his father. Dobby complied, but he punished himself so harshly that Draco felt too guilty to ask again. His father was also determined to improve his standing with his fellow pureblood housemates. One afternoon, he was called downstairs to find Marcus Flint, a Slytherin's sixth-year student and captain of the Quidditch team, sitting in the drawing room with a cup of tea and a self-satisfied expression on his face. "I had a little chat with Mr. Flint," his father announced, as soon as Draco entered the room. "You will be playing Seeker for your house team this year." Draco turned to his father, gaping at him, incredulity washing over him. Of course I wanted that spot on the team. My father knew that, but nothing Lucius Malfoy did to ensure I got it would be to my liking. "Without a tryout?" Draco asked flatly. "Huh?" "A tryout would be a mere formality, with the son of the team's sponsor among the candidates." Lucius shrugged, taking a sip of his tea with a pleased smirk on his face. "Sponsor?" Draco repeated, narrowing his eyes. You bought my way into the team? I merely offered Mr. Flint to provide appropriate brooms to ensure that my son's house had a fair shot at the House Cup this year, he said casually. You can't blame a father for caring, can you, Draco? Draco felt furious. He wanted to try out for the position and earn it. He was a good flyer, and he was sure that if he had been given the chance, he would have made the team. But now he would never know, and he would always be the Malfoy boy who was brought onto the team by his rich father. He counted the days until school started. His only glimpses of light were the letters he received regularly from both Harry and Hermione. Draco suspected they wrote so often to make sure his father hadn't murdered him yet, but he appreciated it nonetheless. He refrained from telling Harry about his position on the Quidditch team. He was too ashamed of how he had received it to reveal it until he absolutely had to. When September 1st finally arrived, Draco felt as if he had reached the end of a prison sentence. His father's mood was even fouler than usual. If I receive one more word of any adventures with your pack of muggle-loving troublemakers, I'm going to take you out of school, he threatened. I don't care what your mother says. I'm not going to stand for any more of your behavior. Shame that I don't care what you say, Draco shot back flatly, pushing past him before his father could reply. His mother took him to King's Cross, thankfully refused the company of her husband. She even made an effort to talk to Hermione's parents when they encountered them, despite the angry looks she received from the Knots, Crabs, and Goyles. Draco felt fiercely proud of her. Where are the Weasleys? Draco asked Hermione, glancing around anxiously as they neared 11 o'clock. They aren't here yet, are they? I don't think so, Hermione muttered, frowning. They are kind of hard to miss. I hope they're not running late. When it was time to board the train, they had still not seen Harry or any of the Weasley kids. They decided to search the train, and finally, as they reached the very last carriage, they found the twins sitting with their usual friend and their little sister. There was still no sign of Harry or Ron, though. Have you seen Ron and Harry? Hermione asked, as she poked her head into their compartment. Not since we arrived at the station, no, one of the twins said, frowning. Draco could never tell them apart, so he didn't even try. We were running late and lost sight of them. We've been searching all over, Draco noted. Maybe you just passed each other, the other twin shrugged. Must have, Hermione nodded, but the look she exchanged with Draco was one of confusion. They made their way toward the other side of the train again, and when they still had not found them, they turned around once more in continued search. When they passed the compartment where Longbottom was sitting alone for the third time, they finally decided to give up and sit with him. Maybe if we stay put, Ron and Harry will find us, Hermione reasoned. Though Draco could tell she didn't believe her own words, he saw his own worry reflected in her brown eyes. I'm telling you, they aren't here, Draco sighed. They have to be somewhere, she insisted. They might have missed the train, Draco pointed out. The twins said they were running late, right? Did, Hermione agreed, biting her lip. What happens if you miss the train? I don't know, Draco shrugged. I think they'll have to contact Dumbledore to get permission to arrive by flu. My granny said I'll have to stay home for the year if I miss the train, Longbottom added, his eyes wide. But maybe she was just saying that to scare me. I'm sure she did, Draco replied skeptically. I can't see Dumbledore refusing anyone attendance just because they missed the train. Harry and Ron did not show up for the rest of the train ride, or for the journey from the station to the school. They were not in the Great Hall for the feast either. By the time food appeared on their plates, Draco felt so sick he couldn't eat anything. Where were the two of them? Surely, if they had just missed the train, they would have ended up waiting for them at school. Flu travelling was much faster than a train ride across the entire country after all. They would have had enough time to arrive while the rest of the students were on their way. So where were they? Draco noticed that at some point Snape picked up McGonagall and Dumbledore and led them out of the hall. This struck Draco as very odd. The headmaster leaving during the welcoming feast was not something that usually happened, he was sure. He looked over to where Hermione was sitting with Longbottom, and it seemed she had noticed and was equally intrigued. Then murmurs started to reach his ears. Apparently the car was enchanted to fly. Okay, crashed right into a tree with it. I hope they get expelled. That would serve Potter right. What was that? Draco asked sharply, turning to the group of fourth years sitting not far from him. They looked up at him as if he were something particularly disgusting found on the sole of their boots, and proceeded to ignore him, acting as if he had not spoken. The old man to try, though. He's always had his ideas about my future. Harry nodded, understanding the weight of family expectations. Well, I'm glad you're here. It wouldn't be the same without you, he said sincerely. Draco smirked, a hint of his usual bravado returning. You just want someone to share in your misadventures, don't you? Maybe, Harry admitted with a grin. But you know, I can't do it alone. Besides, you're always good for some entertaining commentary. Entertaining? I prefer to think of myself as critical, Draco replied, his tone light. They continued walking, the peacefulness of the lake surrounding them. The morning sun cast reflections on the water, and the sounds of Hogwarts waking up filled the air. Do you think we'll hear more about what happened last night? Draco asked, his curiosity piqued again. Probably, Harry said, taking another bite of his sandwich. But I wouldn't worry too much. We'll figure it out like we always do. Draco nodded, a sense of camaraderie settling between them. Whatever strange events awaited them, he felt a little more prepared to face them with Harry by his side. She should really pack up and leave. Divorce isn't viewed highly among purebloods, but when it comes down to my happiness, she doesn't seem to care much about propriety. She's your mother, Harry said quietly. She wants what's best for you. There was a brief silence. Draco wondered if they should change the subject. Mothers and their love for their sons was a touchy topic for Harry after all. But Harry continued a moment later, a smile returning to his face. Mrs. Weasley, at least, was outraged by your father's behavior. It seems like Ron's whole family warmed up to you just for standing up to him. That's nice, Draco blinked, surprised. He was starting to rethink his image of the Weasley family. Weasley himself excluded, of course. No amount of time would make Weasley less bothersome. Draco's first day went by rather calmly. Between classes, homework, and the usual taunts from his housemates, he could feel the beginnings of a routine slipping back into place where it had lain dormant since June. Harry, though, seemed to have had an entirely different return experience. When they met in the library after dinner, Harry spent most of the time venting about Lockhart in whispered tones. Hermione looked low-key affronted, while Weasley observed his broken wand with an air of depression. I told you he's an attention-seeking airhead, Draco muttered, absent-mindedly noting down some facts for his Transfiguration essay. He probably feels threatened by another celebrity in such close proximity. He's a bloody menace, Harry hissed. He's trying to make me seem like the attention-seeking airhead. All I want is to be left alone. I know you do, Draco reassured him. Honestly, everyone at this school who doesn't fancy him will soon know better than to listen to anything he says. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. He's a teacher, you know, Hermione added. You'll need to listen to him if you want to pass your exams, she muttered, her voice edged with irritation. If those are anything like the quiz he gave us today, we can get all the answers by reading Witch Weekly regularly, Weasley replied miserably. He poked at the spellotape around the crack in his wand, flinching as red sparks flew from the tip. Hermione glared at him and buried her face in her herbology book, refusing to speak to them for the rest of the night. Despite the annoyances of teachers and the grumpiness of his fellow Gryffindors, Draco marveled at the normalcy of it all. It felt good to be back at Hogwarts, he decided. Chapter 2. Scary Slytherin tales that are not quite as fictional as assumed. Their first week of lessons would have been blessedly uneventful if not for three major sources of annoyance. The first was, quite unsurprisingly, Gilderoy Lockhart. Apart from giving the most appalling lessons Harry had ever sat in on, which was saying something considering he had History of Magic twice a week, Lockhart seemed to have made it his personal project to infuriate Harry. This, in turn, frustrated Draco, who had to deal with his friend's constant irritation. The second source of annoyance was a first-year Gryffindor named Colin Creevey. Colin was a muggle-born boy who idolized Harry as if he were Merlin himself. He had taken to following Harry around like a lovesick puppy. This might have amused Draco if Colin's stalker tendencies didn't cut into the already precious little time he had to spend with Harry between classes, homework, and their separate living quarters. Draco felt he had gotten quite good at not complaining about being the only stray Slytherin in a group of Gryffindors, always feeling a little on the outside. However, he was not going to give up his share of attention to an annoying kid with a camera, someone who would have been better suited for an internship at Witch Weekly than a school for mostly sane people. The third source of annoyance, or perhaps stress, was the more appropriate term, was Draco's looming debut as a member of the Slytherin Quidditch team. By Friday night, when Flint informed him that he was expected at his first training session the next morning, he still had not broken the news to his friends. He knew rationally that he could not hide it from them forever, but he could not shake the feeling that accepting the position was something shameful, putting him on the same level as his father. "I won't hold you to the deal you made with father, you know," Draco said, desperately trying to ease his own guilt. "If you want to set tryouts, I'd be happy to participate." "What would be the point?" Flint demanded, staring at Draco as if he had lost his mind. "If I don't give the position to you, I'll have to hand over the brooms, and there is just no way. So you'd better not back out, Malfoy," he added, narrowing his eyes at Draco. "I'll personally drown you in the lake if you do." Draco stopped his weak protests and accepted the strange situation he was in. His Slytherin ambition urged him to stop complaining and take the chance at something he had wanted since before he started school. Yet a part of him, influenced by his friendship with someone as righteous as Harry, made him feel like he was doing something wrong and immoral. He tried to console himself by thinking he could give his best and prove he deserved the position. He was a good flyer, brilliant even, he thought with pride. No one would be able to protest Flint's decision to make him seeker once they had seen him on the hall pitch, right? Still, he dreaded the looks his Gryffindor friends would give him for participating in such a vile power play. The thought of disappointing Harry scared him more than anything else. That night, he barely slept. The next morning, as he made his way down to the pitch with his teammates after breakfast, he felt a little sick. His stomach churned when he spotted people in the air. Trying not to sound too hopeful, he pointed out, "The pitch is blocked. Maybe we should just—" "Oh no," Flint interrupted him, smiling in a way that Draco didn't like at all. "I have special permission from Snape since I need to train you. Wood will just have to share." "Wood?" Draco repeated in horror. "Is that Gryffindor up there?" "Yup," Flint nodded, clearly enjoying Draco's distress, which was completely at odds with how Draco felt about the prospect of training. Alongside the Gryffindor team, Harry would see him, and he would notice the brooms too. There was nothing Draco could do to stop the impending disaster. He had spent a lot of time imagining how the Gryffindors would react to his father's scheme, but this was far worse than anything he could have imagined. Wood shouted at Flint as soon as he spotted him. His entire team followed him to the ground to find out what was happening. Draco felt a growing sense of dread as he noticed Hermione, Weasley, and Creevy approaching from a distance. Creevy's camera clicked away, as if Draco needed a photo to remember this moment. "I booked the pitch," Wood yelled at Flint, outraged. "I booked it." "Ah," Flint replied with a nasty smile. "But I have a specially signed note from Professor Snape." He cleared his throat and held the note up dramatically before reading aloud. "I, Professor S. Snape, give the Slytherin team permission to practice today on the Quidditch pitch, owing to the need to train their new seeker." "You've got a new seeker?" Wood asked, clearly caught off guard. "Where?" Draco closed his eyes, feeling paralyzed. A stunned silence filled the air, and Harry broke it. "Draco?" he asked, sounding shocked. Draco slowly opened his eyes and looked at Harry. Instead of anger, Harry's expression was blank, as if he couldn't connect Flint's announcement with Draco's presence among the Slytherin players. "Draco's father has kindly agreed to sponsor our team," Flint continued gleefully, holding his broom so the Gryffindors could see the brand name engraved on the handle. "Look at the generous gift he has made to us." Draco watched as the other Slytherins flashed their brand new Nimbus 2001s. He felt sicker by the minute. Flint continued to brag about their new brooms. Hermione, Weasley, and Creevy finally reached them, demanding to know what was happening. But Draco could not look away from Harry. Their eyes remained locked, and Draco silently pleaded for him to understand. "What's happening?" Weasley asked. "Why aren't you playing?" "Draco?" Hermione gasped. "What are you doing here?" Before they could get answers, Harry approached him. He pushed through the Slytherin players, who were all taller and broader than him, and grasped at Draco's wrist, pulling him away from the crowd. Draco followed without a word, aware that Hermione and Weasley were right behind them. He stopped when they were out of earshot and turned to face Harry, who raised his eyebrows expectantly. "Explain," Harry said. "Father sponsored the team on the condition that I could play Seeker," Draco replied, his voice sounding lifeless to him. "And you accepted?" Weasley demanded, anger spilling from him. "I tried to get out of it," Draco said uncomfortably. "But Flint was adamant. If I backed out, they would have to hand back the brooms, and he wouldn't ever let me live that down. You know he wouldn't." "Who cares?" Weasley snapped. "Since when do you care if the Slytherins hate you or not?" "This is different," Draco protested, looking at Harry, hoping he would understand. "Bloody hell it is," Weasley scoffed. "It's just inconvenient for you, because you'd need to give up your position on the team. We all know you always wanted to play." "Ron," Hermione warned. "It's true, though," Weasley shouted. "He doesn't care if his git of a father brought him into the team as long as he benefits from it." "Ron!" Hermione hissed urgently. "What?" Weasley demanded, turning on her with red ears. "I always told you! He's just like his father!" "I'm not," Draco called defensively, just as Harry said loudly, "Shut it, Ron!" They all looked up at Harry, but he was focused on Draco, a slight frown on his face. "Draco never asked for this," Harry muttered. He glanced at Wood, who was still arguing with Flint, and added, "It's true the Slytherins would make his life hell if he backed out. I saw what they were capable of last year. Personally, I'd prefer Draco not to go through that again." Draco let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "So you don't hate me?" he asked, feeling a bit foolish. "As if I'd ever hate you, after what we went through together last year," Harry rolled his eyes. "For someone who likes to criticize my intelligence, you ask some pretty dumb questions, you know." "Berate," Draco repeated with a smile. "I'm rubbing off on you." Harry gave him an exasperated look, but there was no real heat in it. "Am I the only one who cares about this being unfair?" Weasley demanded angrily. "No one questions the unfairness of Mr. Malfoy's behavior, Ron," Hermione said, elbowing the redhead rather harshly. "But I think we can all agree that we'd play right into his hands if we turned against Draco because of it. He wants us to stop being his friends. Remember?" Weasley grumbled something under his breath, while rubbing his ribs where Hermione's elbow had hit him. But he remained silent. "Exactly," Harry nodded determinedly. "Now let's go back before my team captain kills yours and get back to training. I'd like to get something to eat at some point today, preferably before that detention with Lockhart." Draco smiled, silently thanking Harry. Harry was simply being himself, unlike Ron, and followed him to where their teammates were still arguing. Things should have been quiet and even enjoyable after Draco's worries were lifted. He was finally back at school with his friends and allowed to play Quidditch, even if it wasn't with those friends. He spent his extra time studying like the nerd he secretly was. However, after last year, Draco should have realized that it was never that easy at Hogwarts, especially when you were friends with Gryffindors, particularly Harry Potter. There was the incident when Harry heard a dubious voice muttering about murder, a voice no one else could hear, during that detention with Lockhart. They had endured that detention due to their ill-advised journey to Hogwarts. That had been frightening, but Draco could, with some effort, ignore the trouble it signaled. Harry had spent hours in a room with Lockhart that night. Draco knew he would have gone temporarily insane in that position. Everything seemed fine until Halloween night, when Hogwarts made it clear that all was not well. The evening had been odd and unpleasant. Harry had let himself be dragged into attending the Gryffindor Ghost's miserable Death Day party, which was miserable for more reasons than just celebrating someone's death. When they made their way back to the Great Hall to check if there was any edible food left, Harry heard that voice again. Then, they stumbled over Mrs. Norris. Under normal circumstances, that would have been unpleasant enough, but the fact that she was petrified made it even worse. She was literally turned to stone, not just stunned into stillness by the fact that her owner was unpleasant. It was a terrifying sight, complete with a creepy message written on the wall, with blood and all, the stuff of nightmares, really. That was the moment Draco realized his quiet and enjoyable year had just spiraled down the drain of Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Naturally, things could always get worse, and that was how they were found. Alone at the scene of the crime, the words, "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware," flashed ominously above their heads. "My cat! My cat!" Filch shrieked in despair, falling to his knees. "What's happened to Mrs. Norris?" There was a brief moment of silence before his eyes narrowed in on the four of them. "No," Draco exclaimed, raising his hands. "I know what you're going to say, but it wasn't us." "You've killed her," Filch roared, completely ignoring Draco's protest. Argus," Dumbledore's warning voice interrupted the caretaker as he approached the scene. He took a moment to observe, and then they all found themselves swept off to Lockhart's office, Cat included. There was a lot of discussion about what could have happened. Mostly it was a monologue by Lockhart, while Dumbledore stared at the cat as if trying to read her like a book. Snape and McGonagall watched Dumbledore with similar intent. Filch wailed continuously. Draco might have been annoyed if he hadn't been so horrified by the situation they found themselves in. At last, Dumbledore spoke, announcing that Mrs. Norris was not dead, but he had no idea how she had been petrified. The only thing he seemed sure of was that the four of them hadn't done it. Draco felt a wave of relief wash over him. "He did it! He did it!" Filch shouted, refusing to accept Dumbledore's words as he pointed at Harry. "You saw what he wrote on the wall. He found... in my office. He knows I'm a... Draco struggled to find the right words, but finally he snapped, "I'm a squib." Draco raised his eyebrows at that new information, but Harry responded angrily, "I never touched Mrs. Norris, and I don't even know what a squib is." "Rubbish," Filch snapped. "He saw my quick spell letter." "If I might speak, Headmaster," Snape interjected. Draco's eyes narrowed as he focused on him. Whatever his head of house had to say could not be good, and he was right. Snape began to question their whereabouts during the feast, and why they had chosen not to attend afterward, instead heading into the first-floor corridor toward the crime scene. As they tried to defend themselves while also hiding the existence of the voices in Harry's head, McGonagall came to their defense. She argued with Snape until Dumbledore intervened. "Innocent until proven guilty, Severus," Dumbledore declared. Despite Filch's protests and the promise that Mrs. Norris would be revived by a potion made from Professor Sprout's mandrakes, they were released. "Do you think I should have told them about that voice I heard?" Harry asked, as soon as they were out of earshot. Weasley protested immediately, and for once Draco had to agree with him. "Snape would have been only too happy to declare you insane and dangerous, and ship you off to St. Mungo's," Draco muttered. "Better not give him anything to work with." "You do believe me, don't you?" Harry asked, looking at them earnestly. Weasley and Hermione hurried to agree, but Draco took a moment to consider. He wasn't sure if he believed it until tonight, but the sound of that mysterious voice leading Harry toward a petrified cat, and a message proclaiming that the Chamber of Secrets had been opened. "This is no coincidence," Draco said aloud. "Whatever this voice..." "It led you into this whole mess for a reason," Draco said. Harry looked relieved at Draco's declaration. "But what was that writing on the wall about?" he asked. "The chamber has been opened. What's that supposed to mean?" "Did you never hear about the legend of the Chamber of Secrets?" Draco asked, looking up in surprise. Harry's expression was blank, but Ron frowned, and so did Hermione. "It rings a sort of bell," Ron muttered. "I think someone told me a story about a secret chamber at Hogwarts once. It might have been Bill." "I think I read something in Hogwarts, a history," Hermione added, biting her lip, "but I can't remember." "Well, it's a Slytherin tale," Draco said, frowning. "It might be less popular with you folks." "What's it about?" Harry asked. "Long story short, Salazar Slytherin was a bitter and evil person. Draco shrugged, his frown deepening. He wanted Muggleborns out of the school, and when the other founders refused to oblige, he built this chamber where he hid a dangerous monster, and left the school without telling anybody where it was. Only his true heir is supposed to be able to open it and use the monster to clean the school of Muggleborns. Ugh, Ron made a face. Evil person indeed. It's something pureblood elitists like to refer to, but I always thought it was just a tale, Draco pointed out. You don't think it's actually real, do you? Ron frowned. It sounds like a prank someone like Nott would pull to scare Muggleborns. It does seem kind of far-fetched that a giant monster would have survived within the school for thousands of years, only to be released now, Hermione said, frowning. But then again, something must have attacked Mrs. Norris. An uncomfortable silence fell among them at those words, only to be broken by the chiming of the clock. Midnight, Harry muttered. We'd better get to bed before Snape comes along and tries to frame us for something else. They agreed and parted ways. Harry, Hermione, and Ron made their way up to the Gryffindor Tower, while Draco headed down the stairs toward the dungeons, feeling a heavy weight in his stomach. The Slytherin common room was loud and lively, despite the late hour. Everyone's spirits were strangely high due to the events of the night. It was clear that most of his house thought the whole situation was a fabulous joke. Draco spotted Nott animatedly talking in a corner, surrounded by Crabbe, Goyle, Parkinson, Bulstrode, and Greengrass, all laughing at whatever he was saying. Draco quickly made his way to his dormitory before they noticed him. The only other person already in bed was, unsurprisingly, Zabini. He had always been a quiet, brooding fellow, and Draco understood why he would not enjoy the commotion of the common room. Zabini showed no signs of noticing Draco's entrance, so Draco quickly changed into his pajamas and drew the curtains behind him, glad to be alone with his thoughts. He reflected on the events of the night and all the strange occurrences from the past couple of months. There was the house elf who had appeared at Harry's relative's home, warning Harry to stay away from school. Then there was the incident where Harry and Ron had been unable to get onto platform 9 3/4, and the mysterious voice Harry had heard twice now. There had to be some connection among all of it, right? Something that would explain why this was happening and who was behind it all. Draco tried hard to piece it together, but the exhaustion of the day caught up with him. Soon he dozed off, no closer to an answer than before. The next few days were filled with rampant speculation about the Chamber of Secrets, not just from a large part of the school, but, as anyone could expect, especially from his meddlesome Gryffindor friends. In the time they spent away from Draco, they had already managed to pressure Professor Binns into retelling the exact legend of the chamber. The chamber searched the girls' bathroom next to the crime scene and get caught by Weasley's older prefect brother all in a single day. I was really looking forward to a year without a trapdoor or an invaluable alchemical substance to worry about, Draco pointed out sadly. And now we have a legendary chamber. The Gryffindors ignored him and continued their discussion about who the heir of Slytherin could be. I'm telling you, it's not, Weasley insisted. It's not, Draco replied, rolling his eyes. How do you know? Weasley asked, confronting him with a glare. The other boy had been a bit more hostile since the whole broom incident, but usually Hermione would step on his foot when he became rude. Today, however, she simply raised an eyebrow, looking at him expectantly. Because, Draco said calmly, the thing about pureblood families is that their history is well documented. I can assure you that if Nott's family had a direct link to Salazar Slytherin, I would know. He'd ask us to kneel down and worship him. Isn't that basically what he already does? Harry asked, making a face. He'd be twice as obnoxious, Draco promised. I assure you, it's not him. You should have heard the way he talks about the chamber, though, Weasley shot back. Speculating who gets killed next, threatening Hermione. In case you've forgotten, I share a dormitory with him, Draco grumbled. I know how he talks. He's always had a big mouth, but that never equated to any real power before. What if it is him, though? Harry frowned. When Draco opened his mouth to dismiss him, Harry continued. No, really, Draco. Think about it. The elf trying to keep me away from school? The way Ron and I couldn't get through the platform? Who would have a motive to go that far to get us in trouble? Then why hasn't anything happened to me? Draco asked. Not hates me more than he hates you, Draco explained. He might not dare to do anything under your father's nose, Hermione suggested. Plus, if he wanted to isolate you, the best way would be to keep Harry away, wouldn't it? Draco frowned at her, holding back his frustration. You might have a point there, he admitted, but still. I think it's worth investigating, Harry announced. And how are we supposed to investigate not without him noticing? Draco demanded. He's a Slytherin, and as much as I hate to admit it, he's not dumb. You three are many things, but you aren't discreet. There might be a way, Hermione murmured, her brows drawn together in concentration. She leaned closer, lowering her voice to avoid being overheard. Of course, it would be difficult, and dangerous, very dangerous. We'd be breaking about 50 school rules, I'd expect. Oh, that sounds promising, Draco replied dryly. Hermione ignored him. What we'd need to do is question Not without him realizing it's us. But that's impossible, Harry pointed out. No, it's not. All we'd need would be some polyjuice potion. Draco stared at her incredulously, cutting off Harry and Weasley as they asked what Hermione was talking about. You're mental. Where are we supposed to get polyjuice potion? It's a potion that transforms you into someone else, Hermione explained to Harry and Weasley. She then turned to Draco and said, We'd have to brew it, of course. Brew it, Draco repeated. Hermione, this potion is Newt's level. No, more than Newt's level, I'd expect, and it's bloody dangerous if we screw it up. So, you're trying to say you don't trust me to do it? Hermione asked, obviously hurt. That's not what I'm saying, Draco groaned. I'm saying your idea is mental. But the three of us could change into Slytherins and you could let us into your common room. It would be so easy to question him. Hermione, Draco said, exasperated. Even if Not is the heir of Slytherin, do you really think he'd be stupid enough to boast about it in the common room? This is Slytherin House, not Hufflepuff. You can't trust anyone in there farther than you can throw them. Here, here, Ron grumbled. Well, do you have a better idea? Hermione asked moodily. Yes, Draco replied. Just leave it be for once in your life. The teachers will handle it. Like they handled Quirrell last year, Harry pointed out, clearly frustrated with him. You might note that Quirrell would never have gotten near the stone if you hadn't picked it up from the Mirror of Erised with your pure intentions in the first place, Draco said darkly. And I'm not blaming you, he added, as Harry opened his mouth to argue. It was a messed up situation, and we did what we thought was right. That doesn't mean that, now that we are a year older, we can't learn from it and not act rashly. All three glared at him, unimpressed. I'm fighting a losing battle, aren't I? Draco sighed, speaking to himself in despair. You're going to do it anyway, and I will have to clean up after you to make sure you're not caught. It's better than sitting around waiting for more attacks to happen, Hermione huffed. I agree, Harry nodded, with an air of finality. Now, how do we make that potion? Draco groaned, burying his face in his hands and cursing his life. Chapter 3. Bloody House Elves and Maniac Fathers. Hermione received the book with the instructions from the restricted section of the library, because Lockhart was oblivious and believed her flimsy excuse about wanting to do research for his book. The potion, as Draco had predicted, was extremely complicated to make and required them to steal ingredients from Snape's personal store. This did not make Draco any more enthusiastic about the plan. All he could hope for was that, within the month it would take to complete the potion, the real heir of Slytherin would reveal himself, and an interrogation of Not would no longer be necessary. Draco was unsure if he should be thankful or not that the first Quidditch match of the season, Slytherin versus Gryffindor, was approaching. On one hand, it gave Harry something to focus on other than breaking school rules and getting them all in trouble. On the other hand, Draco would have to face Harry on the pitch, and he was honestly a little scared of that. It would have been different if Draco had played for Hufflepuff or Ravenclaw. He could have mindlessly thrown himself into some friendly rivalry, and they could have walked off the field afterwards, arm in arm, laughing about it. But as a member of the Slytherin team, he felt like a soldier in a war he had no intention of fighting. Both teams hated each other with a passion that was only inflamed further by his father's gold. Draco knew that no matter the outcome of the match, it would not reflect positively on him. If they won, all the Gryffindors would claim it was because of their brooms and call them cheaters. As much as Harry assured him that he was not blaming Draco, he knew Harry would feel bitter after a defeat. If they lost, his team would blame Draco's close ties to Gryffindors, especially to Harry. No matter which way the wind blew, Draco felt he could not win, and he was painfully aware of that. The Sunday of the match was a cloudy day, the threat of rain hanging in the air. Harry had smiled at Draco from across the Great Hall during breakfast, but they hadn't talked. They set off to the pitch separately, surrounded by their respective teams. "Now, Malfoy," Flint said, as they got dressed in their dark green Quidditch robes. "I don't care if Potter is your best friend. If you have to do it to win, you will kick him off the broom." Draco opened his mouth to argue, but closed it again, knowing that protesting would do no good. He nodded, avoiding Flint's gaze to hide the lie. As they walked out to the pitch, the crowd mostly booed them. Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff, as usual, had sided with Gryffindor, and they all seemed furious about the unfair advantage Draco's father had given their team. He noticed some people sending him rude gestures, and tried not to look too closely after that. It was hard not to see Weasley throwing insults at the Slytherin team with all his might. When the Gryffindor team joined them, the looks on their faces were determined and dangerous. Even Harry's mouth was drawn into a thin line, and he did not meet Draco's eyes. "Mount your brooms!" Madam Hooch called. Draco hastily tore his eyes away from Harry to obey. "On my whistle! 3, 2, 1! They all sped into the air as soon as the signal came, and the battle for the quaffle broke out immediately. Draco tried not to watch too closely, knowing it would do no good to get distracted from his task, especially with an opponent like Harry, who was a natural-born seeker. He rose into the air and let his eyes wander, trying to spot the little golden snitch. It didn't take long for Draco's eyes to fall on Harry. He frowned as he saw the Weasley twins surrounding Harry. They tried hard to shield him from a bludger that seemed determined to target him. Draco gaped, freezing mid-air as he watched the scene unfold. "What the bloody hell," he muttered before abandoning all professionalism and approaching them as close as he dared. "What's wrong?" he called out to Harry. "Someone tampered with this bludger, that's what's wrong," one of the twins shouted back. "Stay away, Malfoy, we're not saving your neck if you get in the way." Meanwhile, the other twin signaled to their captain for a timeout, and soon Madam Hooch's whistle echoed through the air. Draco remained thunderstruck as the bludger continued to chase Harry even after the game was stopped. What in the name of Merlin was happening? Desperately, he scanned the crowd for anything unusual. Maybe someone was jinxing the bludger like Quirrell had jinxed Harry's broom the previous year. It was hard to make out details from the pitch, and soon Flint bumped into him from behind. "What are you doing?" Flint demanded. "Concentrate on finding the snitch, not on Potter." "But there's something going on. This bludger is behaving strangely," whined. Draco insisted. "Who cares?" Flint grumbled. "If it takes Potter out of the match, all the better for us." He shoved Draco's shoulder hard. "I told you not to let your friendship with Potter get in the way of our victory. If you lose us this match because of him, I'll make you pay." Draco had 1,000 sharp replies ready, but held them back, glaring at Flint, who glared right back. Their staring contest was interrupted by Madam Hooch's whistle. "Everyone, back on your brooms," she called. "We'll continue." With a final sneer, Flint turned away from Draco and mounted his broom. Draco followed suit, but his eyes were already searching for Harry. He realized with despair that Harry had convinced the Weasley twins to let him handle the bludger alone. The bloody idiot. The next few minutes felt like the longest of Draco's life. He had given up on searching for the snitch, not by choice, but because his eyes were glued to Harry, who flew in daring maneuvers to evade the bludger. A couple of times, he had to call out to Harry to avoid near collisions. Frankly, Draco hadn't felt this terrified since they had gone down the trapdoor last term. Then Harry froze in place and stared at Draco with wide eyes. "What are you doing?" Draco yelled. "Watch out!" It was too late. The bludger slammed into Harry's elbow with full force, followed by the sickening sound of bones breaking and Harry's grunt of pain. Draco cursed and instinctively moved to approach him. Bludger be damned. But then Harry sped past him with grim determination. Everything happened too quickly, and Draco's mind struggled to keep up. Harry's uninjured hand closed around the snitch, but then his broom dove towards the ground at an alarming speed. Draco raced after him and caught up just in time to pull Harry off his broom and into his arms before he crashed. Harry groaned against Draco in pain as they landed rather clumsily, but without any further injuries. "You bloody idiot!" Draco snapped as he turned to face Harry. "Not only was that catch of yours terribly unfair, I had a mad bludger chasing after me the whole match, and you're complaining about unfairness?" Harry asked faintly, almost smiling. "But you also risked your neck in the process. Do you know how dangerous that was? Gryffindor, do you even realize what could have happened? Harry began to respond, but then he fell silent. His eyes closed, and his head rested against Draco's shoulder. "Harry!" Draco yelled, shaking him, but Harry didn't respond. He had lost consciousness. Harry's entire team rushed over, pushing Draco aside to reach their injured seeker. Draco turned, searching for Madame Hooch to demand that Harry be taken to the hospital wing. But Lockhart suddenly pushed past him. "Fear not," Lockhart called, far too cheerfully for Draco's liking. "I will have him fixed in no time." "No!" Draco shouted immediately, but no one seemed to hear him. At that moment, Harry opened his eyes and glanced up at Lockhart, who was kneeling beside him. "Oh no," Harry moaned. "Not you." "Doesn't know what he's saying," Lockhart announced. Draco felt an overwhelming urge to grab the beater's bat that one of the Weasley twins had dropped and hit Lockhart with it. There was an uproar of protest from Harry, his team, and the Gryffindors who had gathered around, but Lockhart ignored them all. He confidently removed Harry's bones from his arm completely. Draco swore that Crabbe and Goyle had more sense than Lockhart. At least they knew better than to attempt magic they were unqualified for. When Harry was finally taken to the infirmary, Weasley suddenly appeared in front of Draco, his face nearly as scarlet as his Gryffindor scarf, and darker than his hair, as he glared down at him in anger. Hermione clung to Weasley's arm, wide-eyed, trying to keep him in check. "Was it you?" Weasley demanded, outraged. "Did you hex that bludger to win?" Draco just stared at Weasley. Draco stood there incredulously for a moment, unsure if he had heard correctly. Then he pushed Ron hard. "Draco!" Hermione hissed, but Draco was already shouting. "Are you out of your mind?" he roared. "Do you really think I'd put Harry's life at risk to win a stupid Quidditch match? You complete—" "Who knows?" Ron shot back, looking even more flushed. "After the way you let your father buy your way into the team." "I did not ask for this, you moron," Draco called out. Hermione had to hold on to him to keep him from hitting Ron. "How many times do I have to tell you that I'm not my father?" "Draco, please calm down," Hermione pleaded. "We know it wasn't you. Ron is just mental," Draco offered. "Has utterly lost it." "That's quite enough, Mr. Malfoy," Madame Hooch said, coolly, stepping between them. 10 points each from you and Mr. Weasley. Now if you would please get to your changing room. Mr. Weasley and Miss Granger, off the pitch, please. The match is over." Ron threw Draco another glare before turning his back and stalking off toward the school. Hermione gave Draco a look of despair. "I'll talk to you later, okay?" she whispered hurriedly before following Ron. Draco was left alone, facing not just his team captain, but his entire team. He couldn't care less, though. The fact that Ron would actually accuse him of hurting Harry stung more than anything they could say. Draco was not allowed to see Harry that night. When he arrived at the hospital wing, Madame Pomfrey was already throwing out the entire Gryffindor team, insisting that Harry needed rest to regrow his bones. Hermione hung back to talk to Draco, trying to reassure him that neither Harry nor she thought he had anything to do with that bludger, and that Ron would see it the same way once. Draco had calmed down enough to think straight, but he seriously doubted that. "You heard what he said," he reminded Hermione bitterly. "He'll always group me in with my father, no matter what I do. I'll always be the Death Eater's son, the evil Slytherin plotting against everything that's good in Gryffindor. Next, he'll accuse me of being the heir of Slytherin, you'll see." Of course he won't. Don't be ridiculous, Hermione sighed. We shouldn't turn against each other when there's obviously someone out there who's actually after Harry. Again. I'm not turning against anyone, Draco pointed out. I spent a whole Quidditch match worrying about keeping Harry alive, in case you missed it. And in return, I got yelled at by both my team and my friends, so don't turn this against me. I'm not, Hermione assured him, holding her hands up in surrender. Please, Draco, just calm down. I'll go talk to Ron, and I'll make sure he apologizes to you. What he said was out of line. Now, please don't rip anyone's head off before dinner, all right? Draco glared at her, but wisely chose not to respond. The promised apology, of course, never came, but Draco hadn't really expected one. Instead, when Harry was released from the hospital wing the next day, he had news that made Draco forget all of his anger. Creevy was petrified? Draco demanded, after he picked Harry up. And what do you mean the house elf was back? Will you let me finish at least one part of the story? Harry elbowed him. And don't be so loud, people might hear. By the way, have you seen Ron and Hermione? He added, looking around as if he expected them to round the corner any moment. They weren't at breakfast, Draco answered, feeling a bit sour at the mention of Weasley. Maybe they're waiting for you in your common room, so you can have a nice little reunion. Harry said, Gryffindor talks without me. He looked at Draco, searching his face with a frown. Don't tell me you and Ron fought again while I was hospitalized? Never mind that now, Draco sighed. Tell me about the elf. What did it want? Well, Harry grimaced. Turns out he was the one jinxing the bludger and blocking the entrance to Platform 9 and 3/4 on September 1st. He wants me out of Hogwarts because the Chamber of Secrets has been opened again. Again? Draco repeated. It's been opened before. That's what Dobby said, Harry confirmed. Draco froze at those words, making Harry pause and stare at him in confusion. Draco? What did you just say? Draco breathed, feeling cold all over. That the chamber has been opened before? No, that's... Draco blinked and shook his head. What did you say the elf was called? Harry looked at him intently. Dobby, I said that last time, didn't I? No, Draco muttered automatically. You never mentioned a name in the letter. Do you know Dobby? Harry asked eagerly, taking a step closer. Is it not elf? Draco took a step back as Harry approached, feeling like a frightened animal. Panic flooded his veins and he could not meet Harry's gaze. No, Draco lied. I misheard. I thought you said something else. Really? Harry sounded suspicious. Of course he did, Draco thought hysterically. But that was nothing compared to how Harry would look at him if he knew that his father's elf had known about the Chamber of Secrets reopening this year since summer. That meant, almost surely, that his father had his hands in the whole thing. Draco steeled himself. He closed down his emotions, the way his mother had taught him to at a young age, his expression into a neutral one. Finally, he met Harry's eyes and shook his head. Sorry, Draco sighed. I thought you'd said Dolly. And for a moment I thought of the Parkinson's elf, but I jumped to conclusions. I see, Harry nodded, his face clearing. It was painful to see how quickly Draco believed him. But Draco knew he was good at this. It was the one thing his parents had made sure he learned. Composure. Easy to do, really. The whole thing is making everyone jumpy. Yeah, Draco agreed, making a face. So, what else did Dobby say? He forced his voice not to crack at the name. Not much, Harry sighed. It seemed like he can't really say as much as he wanted to, because he was working against the orders of his master, and whichever family he belongs to, they seem to be treating him horribly. Pureblood families rarely treat house elves with dignity, Draco nodded, but his mind was already somewhere else. His thoughts were spinning and tumbling over each other. What was he going to do? Anyways, we really need to go looking for Ron and Hermione, Harry announced. Are you coming? I told you, they're probably in your common room, Draco said, grasping onto the chance to excuse himself without drawing attention to it and clinging to it fiercely. Why don't you go up and look? I'll meet you in the library later. Okay, Harry nodded, already taking a step down the corridor in the direction of the Gryffindor Tower. We'll meet you there. Draco nodded and watched Harry's back as he hurried out of sight. Only when he was truly gone did Draco allow his facade to crumble. His breathing sped up without his control, and he wrapped his arms around his torso, trying to physically fight down the panic attack he felt approaching. It was his father. He was not sure how he had done it, but his father had opened the Chamber of Secrets. Draco had refused, determined to break my ties with Muggleborns and blood traitors. Now my father has taken it upon himself to cleanse the school of them. Draco stood in the middle of the corridor, hyperventilating. He wasn't sure how long he had been there until a voice snapped him out of it. "Mr. Malfoy, what you doing here?" Draco looked up to see Professor Snape. His head of house was watching him closely, as if trying to see right through him. Draco immediately put up his walls, trying to clear his head. He wasn't sure if Snape was a Legilimens, but he wasn't going to take any chances. "Nothing," Draco replied, as calmly as he could. "I was just on my way to the library." Snape continued to watch him, his dark eyes seeming to pierce through him. Draco forced himself not to meet his gaze, instead focusing on his teacher's forehead. "Very well," Snape said slowly. "If there's anything you want to discuss, you know where to find me." Draco frowned at him, but Snape was already moving past him, walking down the corridor toward the dungeons. Panic returned as Draco wondered if Snape knew. Did he know about his father's involvement? Was he going to tell Dumbledore? Draco felt horrified at the thought of what people would say if they knew his father had opened the Chamber of Secrets. Would they accuse him of helping? Of knowing all along and doing nothing? Taking a deep breath, he tried to think rationally. He had to do something. He needed to collect information. If he understood how his father had opened the chamber, perhaps he could close it again without anyone noticing. "Dobby," he whispered, and then he ran. He found an old classroom on the second floor, one that hadn't been used for classes in decades. Confident he wouldn't be interrupted there, he cleared his throat and spoke loudly into the empty room. "Dobby, I'm calling you." It took a moment, but then, with a loud popping sound, the tiny elf appeared in front of Draco. He looked up at Draco with his large, fearful eyes. "Master Draco is calling Dobby?" he asked in a high, squeaky voice. "What do you know about Father and the Chamber of Secrets?" Draco demanded, his tone superior and unforgiving. He noted the way his father tended to speak, which made him quite uncomfortable. Dobby's eyes widened, almost comically, and he shook his head quickly. "Dobby is not knowing anything, Master Draco," he insisted. "Don't lie to me," Draco shouted. "I know you've been to Harry's relatives this summer. I know you bewitched the entrance to platform 9 3/4 at King's Cross to not let Harry and Weasley through. I know you hexed the bludger to knock Harry off his broom, and that you went to see him in the infirmary last night. You know something, and I order you to tell me." Dobby's eyes watered, and he fumbled with the dirty rag he was wearing in place of clothes, crumbling it between his fingers. "Dobby cannot tell, Master Draco," he whispered. "Dobby was forbidden by Master Lucius to—" "I'm your master too," Draco interrupted. "And you're going to tell me whatever it is he is doing so I can stop him." Dobby looked taken aback, his teary eyes searching Draco's face. "Master Draco is wanting to help Dobby," he whispered. "Master Draco is helping keep Harry Potter safe." "Harry is my friend," Draco exclaimed desperately. "Of course I want to keep him safe, and preferably not by knocking him off a broom or keeping him at a house he hates. But that's not all. I'm not going to let Father just off people he doesn't like me befriending. I'm not going to sit back and watch him hurt. Worse, kill whoever he pleases," Dobby wailed, throwing himself at Draco's feet. "Master Draco," he sobbed, "if Dobby had known that being Harry Potter's friend made Master Draco as noble as—" "Oh, cut it out," Draco said desperately. "Stop crying and tell me what it is Father is doing, will you? A cat and a boy have been petrified. If anyone knows that the source of these attacks is the Malfoy family—" He cut himself off, shuddering. "Just tell me, Dobby," he pleaded. "How is he doing it?" "It's the diary, Master Draco," Dobby whimpered, still on the ground, wiping at his face. "The diary?" Draco repeated, confused. "The diary he who must not be named left in Master Lucius's possession," Dobby nodded. "It's dark magic, Master Draco, really dark magic, and Master Lucius gave it to the youngest Weasley." The youngest, Ginny? Draco breathed, thunderstruck. But how? Oh, Merlin, Diagon Alley. Yes, Dobby confirmed. He put it into her cauldron. No one ever noticed. And she is thick enough to use it? Draco demanded, outraged. I know she is Weasley's sister, but by Salazar... She doesn't realize, Master Draco. Dobby shook his head, looking despaired. She thinks it's just a diary that writes back to her. Which is not creepy at all, Draco commented sarcastically, running a hand through his hair. I need to get it back from her. Dobby looked up at Draco hopefully. Dobby could do it, Master Draco, he offered, getting back to his feet, eager to help Draco in that plot against his father. Dobby knows where she keeps it. Dobby can go get it. Do that, Draco nodded. Now, I'll wait here. Dobby nodded, and with another burst of determination prepared to carry out Draco's command. With a popping sound, the elf vanished. Draco paced the room from wall to wall for a few minutes, until Dobby returned, holding a black leather-bound book. Here, Master Draco, Dobby whispered fearfully. This is it. Draco hesitated for a moment, then reached out to take the book. As soon as he touched it, he felt powerful magic surging through it, causing him to shudder. Okay, Draco said, taking a deep breath. Okay. He looked back at Dobby. Now what do I do with it? Dobby stared at him blankly. Draco sighed. Fine, he muttered. I'll think of something. Now off you go, Dobby, before Father notices your absence. Thank you, Master Draco, Dobby whispered, tears in his eyes once more. With one last popping sound he left, leaving Draco alone with the book in his hand, feeling the dark magic emanating from it gnawing at him. Chapter 4. Tom Riddle, the heir of Slytherin. December came and passed in a blur for Draco. He kept the evil diary in the chest Hagrid had given him the year before to keep Not's hands off his things. It was hidden away from anyone who might be looking for it. He was afraid to take it out, even for a moment. Draco swore he could feel the dark magic reaching for him whenever he opened the chest to take out clothes or books, and it made him shudder. He knew that eventually he'd have to do something about it. If it was found in his possession, he would be the one to be blamed. But he was unsure of what exactly he should do. If he marched up to a teacher to hand it over or report it, he would automatically be suspected, just like Weasley had suspected him of hexing that bludger. He could not let that happen. Harry and Hermione had trusted him up to now, but Draco didn't know if their trust would stretch this far. He would do nothing to jeopardize his friendship with the only people who believed in him, apart from maybe his mother. No, he would have to find a way to seal the chamber on his own, but he had no idea how to go about it. Frankly, he was scared of being cursed in one way or another if he held the diary for too long. He would have to think up a strategy first. Throughout that process, he would just try his best to pretend that the damn thing was not rotting away hidden among his things. One thing Draco was sure of, though, was that there was no way he was going to spend Christmas at the manor this year. As soon as Professor Snape hung out the list for students who wanted to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas, he signed up. He gave his mother a feeble excuse about studying, one he did not even expect her to believe, though she was kind enough to pretend she did. Harry, Hermione, and Weasley were all staying too, partly because of the potion they had been secretly brewing in the haunted girls' toilet on the second floor. Creevy's attack weighed heavily on Draco. He had never encountered a more depressing ghost than Moaning Myrtle. Each time they came across her, he felt appalled. At least she seemed unlikely to reveal that they were breaking school rules in the very rooms she haunted. He did his best to tolerate her presence. Draco also made a point of not wanting to leave Hermione, Harry, and Ron to their own devices during the potion brewing process. I know you are perfectly capable, Hermione, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, a defense mechanism whenever he felt panicked and overwhelmed. But I don't trust these two dunderheads. It will be better for you to have a rational mind at your side, just in case. Ron spluttered angrily at Draco's words, but Harry merely glared at him half-heartedly. Harry then interrupted Ron, asking, I thought you said that whole plan was, what, a stupid and unnecessary risk? Well, it is, Draco insisted. I'm still convinced Nott has nothing to do with it. voice in his head reminded him that his own father was to blame instead, but he did his best to ignore it and maintain a straight face. "But I've been friends with Gryffindors long enough to know when I'm fighting a lost battle, so I'm just going to hang around and make sure you don't get yourself expelled." In reality, Draco was thankful for the distraction the potion provided for his friends. It kept their minds off him, and no one seemed to suspect anything was wrong. He had watched Ginny closely in the days after he acquired the diary. While she appeared distraught and worried about both the attack on Creevy and the loss of the diary, she had not confided in any of her brothers, which was good. Maybe she would be smart enough to keep quiet about it, and no one would ever have to know. Draco doubted she had made the complete connection between the diary and the Chamber of Secrets. He was pretty sure all. And Harry and Nott were exchanging hexes with increasing intensity. Draco couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as he watched the chaos unfold. Lockhart, trying to regain control, stepped in to intervene, but only made things worse. His attempts to calm the students were met with laughter and shouts. Meanwhile, Snape stood back, arms crossed, an amused expression on his face. Draco turned to Zabini. "Can you believe this? It's like a circus," he said, shaking his head. Zabini shrugged, his expression unreadable. "At least it's entertaining." As the dueling continued, Draco felt a rush of adrenaline. He was curious to see how far Harry would push Nott. The tension in the air was palpable, and despite the chaos, Draco was intrigued by the display of magic. The dueling club was supposed to be a distraction, but it turned into something much more. The thrill of the fight, the unexpected alliances, and the sheer unpredictability of it all made the event far more engaging than he had anticipated. Bulstrode's display of violent aggression surprised him. He had known that girl long enough to expect better judgment from her. All around, people were noticing small to medium-sized injuries caused by spells that were definitely more than just disarming. Zabini picked up his wand from the ground, where it had fallen after Draco had hit him, looking quite bored. It was then that Lockhart decided to teach them blocking spells, completely oblivious to his own incompetence. Snape, of all people, singled out Nott and Harry as a volunteer pair. The crowd gathered around the stage again, and Draco felt a sense of apprehension as Lockhart leaned in to give Harry what was sure to be useless instructions in a hushed voice. Meanwhile, Snape and Nott were conspiring on the opposite end of the stage, wearing nasty looks. "Harry would do us all a favor if he could just incapacitate Nott right there," Weasley muttered, just for Hermione's ears, but Draco caught it from her other side. "Ron," Hermione hissed, "we're supposed to learn how to defend ourselves, not—" I know, Weasley grumbled. "I'm just saying it would be a lot easier than our original plan." "Because finishing someone off in front of a whole school of witnesses doesn't draw any attention," Draco replied dryly. "I see your masterminds ripens with time, Weasley, just like good elf wine." Weasley shot him a nasty look, but then Lockhart counted down for Harry and Nott to start dueling, drawing everyone's attention to the stage. 3, 2, 1, go! "Serpent Sortia!" Nott cried, and a long black snake shot out of the end of his wand, leaving Harry to stare at it blankly. Draco rolled his eyes as the crowd backed away. Was this really all they had to show for it? An old conjured house emblem to hiss at Harry? He expected more from Snape. But then Lockhart stopped Snape from banishing the snake. He failed in his own attempt, and instead sent the enraged creature toward a Hufflepuff boy. Before Draco knew it, Harry was hissing at the snake. Draco stared, speechless and stunned, as Harry emitted sinister, rasping sounds that resembled a snake's voice. People gasped and backed away further. Hermione grasped Draco's arm, covering her mouth in shock. "Parcel tongue," she breathed. Suddenly, the snake stilled and turned to look at Harry. It seemed to deflate visibly, and Harry looked relieved for about 5 seconds until he met the Hufflepuff's eyes. "What do you think you're playing at?" the boy shouted. Harry stared at him in confusion, eyes wide, as he stormed out of the hall. Weasley was already moving when Draco began to feel his limbs again. He dragged Harry out of the Great Hall, with Hermione following and pulling at Draco's arm to urge him along. They ran all the way to the second-floor bathroom, where their cauldron bubbled peacefully in one of the stalls. Only when the door closed behind them did Weasley confront Harry. "You're a Parselmouth. Why didn't you tell us?" "I'm a what?" Harry asked, puzzled. "A Parselmouth," Weasley repeated impatiently. "You can talk to snakes." "I know," said Harry, still looking puzzled, as he began to recount a story about how he had set a snake loose on his cousin once. Draco stared at Harry, feeling cold all over. He didn't pay attention to Hermione and Weasley's attempts to explain that Harry's gift was not as common as he assumed, and the implications of it spun his head with panic. This could not be happening. All suspicion would fall on Harry now, Draco's best friend of all people in the whole school, when really it was his father who had started this. He could not let that happen. He had to stop this before Harry got into too much trouble. He was the only one who could, after all. But how was he going to clear any suspicion of Harry being the heir of Slytherin? It was ridiculous for any real Slytherin to even think about. But he had to be careful not to get accused himself. "But I'm not," Harry insisted, panic creeping into his voice. "You'll find that hard to prove," Hermione said. "He lived about 1,000 years ago. For all we know, you could be." "He couldn't," Draco interrupted, his voice rough. "You underestimate us purebloods, Hermione. We've documented our ancestry for thousands of years. You can trace the last branches of the Slytherin family right to where they died out. There is no connection to the Potter family at all. We'd know if there was." "Purebloods might believe that," Hermione shrugged him off. "But they don't make up the majority of this school, Draco. The rest of us can't help but see that someone with a link to Slytherin has got to be among us, whether this link is documented or not. And with Harry being a Parseltongue—" "Harry's a Gryffindor," Draco insisted. "No one in their right minds would—" "People are scared, Draco," Hermione reminded him. "They are not in their right minds." Draco took a shaky breath, knowing she was right. He glanced at Harry, and seeing the pure fear on his face made him decide he needed to use the diary in his possession to find the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. Then he could seal it, or, if he couldn't, at least hand all the information he had over to Dumbledore as a gesture of good faith that might save him from suspicion. He was aware that it would be dangerous, that it was a lunatic thing to try to achieve on his own, but he had no choice. If it was to save Harry, he would do it. Draco opened the chest the moment he made his decision. Draco made his way to the dormitory that night. Thankfully, it was deserted. Most of his classmates were still in the common room, discussing the events of the dueling club. Draco had not even cared to find out what they were saying about Harry. He was too focused on the mission he had set for himself. Now he knelt on the floor next to his bed, staring at the leather-bound diary lying at the bottom of the chest. A wave of apprehension washed over him. It felt as if invisible tendrils of dark magic were reaching for him. He wanted to jerk back, slam the chest shut, and never open it again. Instead, he reached out and closed his hand around the diary. His fingernails dug into the leather as he crawled onto his bed and closed the curtains around himself, eager not to be disturbed. He dropped the diary onto the mattress and took a deep breath before flipping it open. It was completely empty. The pages had yellowed with age, except for the name T.M. Riddle on the first page. Draco had never thought much about the Dark Lord's real name. If he had, he would have expected a well-known pureblood family name, something he would recognize. Riddle sounded so normal. Muggle. Draco shook off the thought and stared at the diary. "Now what exactly do I do with you?" he muttered to himself. A voice in his head, sharp like his father's, replied, "People usually write in diaries, you dim-witted brat." With a sigh, he got up to fetch a quill and ink before settling back into his previous position. He opened the bottle of ink and dipped his quill into it, hesitating for a moment before placing the tip on the empty second page. "September 2nd, he wrote. "Where is the Chamber of Secrets?" Draco felt immensely silly, but not for long. Almost as soon as he finished writing, the ink seemed to sink into the pages, vanishing before his eyes. Draco stared in disbelief as new words formed on the page. The script was different from his own, less tidy and with more squiggled letters. "Hello, may I ask who you are?" Draco's lips tightened at the question, and the words vanished again. He set down the quill to respond. "That's of no interest to you. I asked you a question." Once more the words disappeared and reformed. "You are wrong. It is of great interest to me. Since you are obviously not Ginny Weasley. I'm curious by nature, you see. But never mind. If you don't want to answer me, that's fine. May I ask how you came into the possession of my diary?" Frustration bubbled up within Draco. He should have known it wouldn't be that easy. "I know what you did to Ginny," he wrote. "You made her open the chamber for you so you could attack the caretaker's cat and that Gryffindor first year. I'm not going to let you make me one of your chess pieces too. Are you a defender of the Muggleborns then? Is it your intention to stop me?" Draco glared at the page as the words vanished again. He quickly scribbled, "You bet!" His quill pressed down too hard on the page, but the paper held. The diary took longer to form new words this time. When they appeared, Draco dropped his quill in shock. "You have a lot of nerve, Draco Lucius Malfoy. Much more than I expected, knowing your family." Drops of ink from the quill spilled onto the page as the words disappeared again, replaced by new ones. "You want to know how I know your name? This is not a normal diary, you know. It can do a lot of things a 12-year-old boy like you cannot even begin to understand." Draco's hands trembled, and his breathing quickened. Instinctively, he tried to suppress his emotions and shield his mind from outside access. "Are you scared? You're—" Draco gulped before he finally picked up the quill again. He wrote, "I'm going to hand this diary over to the authorities." The response came quickly. "We both know you're not going to do that." "Are we?" Draco asked, his heartbeat loud in his ears. "Yes. You would have handed it over right away if that was your intention. But you are scared of being associated with these attacks. Ginny has told me about you, you know." Draco wrung his hands and quickly wrote, "Oh? What has she told you?" This time the text that appeared was longer, a whole paragraph of writing that was neither his own nor the Dark Lord's. As he read, Draco realized it was Ginny's words. "Ron says Harry and Hermione trust Draco Malfoy, but he doesn't. Dad has talked about his father a lot at home, and we met him at Diagon Alley too. He was arrogant and mean. Draco seems arrogant too in some ways, but he obviously doesn't like his father very much. I'm not sure what to think. I just hope Harry knows what he's doing. I don't want him to get hurt by associating with a family of Death Eaters." Draco's eyes stung as he read her words. He blinked, trying desperately to suppress his emotions once more. "You won't hand this diary over to anyone," the Dark Lord wrote, now in his own script again, "because everyone will be thinking you've been helping your father with his scheme." With trembling fingers, Draco picked up the diary and slammed it shut. He was breathing hard, blinking back tears. "Bloody hell," he whispered under his breath. "What am I going to do?" Draco did not sleep that night, consumed by fear that gnawed at him through the night and into the next day. He avoided the others between classes and kept to himself, thinking about what to do with the diary. He should really hand it in, he thought. What the Dark Lord had written had been, much to his dismay, all too clear. Draco felt a wave of frustration wash over him. He was only 12 years old and completely unprepared for a situation like this. He should get rid of the diary before it ensnared him like it had Ginny, pulling him into a point of no return. Instead of paying attention in Transfiguration, he stared at Professor McGonagall absently, feeling nauseous. What would the head of Gryffindor say if he confessed that he possessed the Dark Lord's evil diary? What if he revealed that his father had given it to Ginny Weasley, knowing it would lead her to open the Chamber of Secrets? McGonagall had always been strict yet kind to him, but would she believe he had no part in his father's scheme? As if sensing his distraction, McGonagall's blue eyes focused on him several times. When the bell rang, signaling the end of class, and the Slytherins began to pack up and file out. She approached his table, frowning down at him. "Mr. Malfoy," she said, "is there anything on your mind?" Draco swallowed hard. It was now or never. He opened his mouth, trying to decide where to begin, but then everything went blank. When he regained his senses, he found himself inexplicably soaked and freezing cold. Confused, he looked around. He was standing in the middle of the second-floor corridor, not far from where the first attack had occurred, with no idea how he had arrived there. He wasn't alone, though. Students walked up and down the corridor, chatting excitedly, their voices tinged with nervousness. They were so agitated that none of them noticed Draco's state. "What was that Hufflepuff's name?" one student asked. "Justin Finch-Fletchley. He's the one Potter tried to chase the snake onto yesterday at dueling club," another replied. "So now he got him?" "Well, he was found at the scene of the crime." "How much proof do you need?" "Need anything, Sophie?" "How is the boy?" "Petrified like the others. So is Headless Nick. It's scary, isn't it? That whatever Potter is doing can affect even ghosts." "No one is safe!" Draco couldn't breathe. He didn't tell his feet to move, but he found himself running all the way back to the Slytherin quarters. The dormitory was deserted, as it was the middle of the day. At least, Draco thought it was the middle of the day. He sank to the floor as soon as he closed the door behind him, his whole body shaking in what he recognized as a panic attack. "It was me," he thought desperately. "I attacked Finch-Fletchley, and everyone thinks it was Harry. What am I going to do?" With blurred vision, he directed his gaze to the chest beside his bed, where he knew the diary was still stored. Draco imagined he could feel the tendrils of dark magic reaching out to him from across the room, just as it had throughout the school, closing around his wrists in a grip he could not escape. He let out a broken sob and buried his face in his knees. Chapter 5. Don't Let Them Know. By some stroke of luck, Harry did not get expelled for the attacks on Finch-Fletchley and the Gryffindor ghost. Draco thanked Merlin and Godric, not that he owed anything to Salazar, that Dumbledore seemed to have unshakable faith in Harry. Of course, Draco would not have allowed the headmaster to proceed with an actual expulsion. If it had come to that, he would have stepped in and turned himself over. He had been adamant about doing it the night after the attacks. However, after hearing from Harry that Dumbledore, unlike the rest of the school, did not doubt him at all, Draco's resolve crumbled. If Harry was not in immediate danger, that gave him more time to figure out a solution, Draco thought. He just needed to find a different way to gather information, because he refused to touch the diary again. He was convinced that the diary's way of possessing people was through writing in it, so he would not do it again. To be safe, he kept his mind closed off at all times. For the next few days, when he had no lapses in consciousness and no more attacks occurred, he started to feel a little easier. It was mainly when he was alone and not busy that the persistent feeling of guilt became hard to ignore. He tried to keep his mind on his books to avoid the problem, but it was not working as well as he had hoped. It felt like he was held at one point constantly. And Draco had never been good at handling pressure. Hermione noticed, and so did Harry after a while. Thankfully, they assumed Draco's worry was about Harry's situation more than his own. "We'll have the potion done by Christmas," Hermione told him soothingly one afternoon over their charms homework. "And then we'll be one step closer to knowing what is going on, I'm sure." Draco just nodded mutely, afraid to say anything, certain that Weasley had a knack for turning any word into an admission of guilt. This time, Draco couldn't argue, as Weasley would be completely right. Christmas was approaching, along with the completion of the Polyjuice potion. On Christmas Eve, Hermione, the mastermind behind the operation, informed them that the potion was finished, and they would act that very night. Not Crabbe and Goyle had all stayed for the Christmas holidays. Although Millicent Bulstrode had gone home, Hermione was confident she could pretend to have changed her mind about participating. Harry and Weasley, who would impersonate Crabbe and Goyle, were carefully instructed to trick the two oafs into eating cupcakes laced with sleeping draught. Draco was relieved that his only responsibility was to let them into the Slytherin quarters. He didn't want to waste energy pointing out the loopholes and dangers in their plan. He could always intervene if they got into real trouble. As long as they didn't focus too closely on him, he was happy to let them proceed. After dinner, Draco lingered in the dungeons, avoiding his housemates while waiting for the Gryffindors in disguise to arrive. When they finally did, it was slightly after their scheduled time, and Hermione was absent. "What?" Draco started, but Goyle interrupted him with an unusual determination. "No time to explain. Let's just go." Draco nodded, deciding that it was Harry in Goyle's body. He turned to the stone wall that concealed the entrance to the Slytherin quarters. "Pureblood," he announced, and the walls slid open for them to enter. "You better go ahead," Draco said, turning to the other two. "It would be bad if Nott saw us together. I'll follow in a minute or two." "Thanks, Goyle," Harry replied. Draco muttered as he clapped Crabbe on the shoulder before slipping past him. Weasley just nodded and followed him. Once they were gone, Draco stepped back, allowing the door to close again. He barely had a moment to breathe when a voice called from down the corridor. "Oh, look who it is! Malfoy the blood traitor!" Draco schooled his features into boredom, even though his heartbeat quickened. That had been close. He turned to face Nott, who approached with a smirk. "Your insults are as uncreative as always, Nott," Draco said. "Why don't you read a book for a change to enhance your vocabulary?" "Careful, Malfoy," Nott hissed. "Or I might tip off the heir of Slytherin to put you on his list." "Good luck with that," Draco muttered as he turned back to the door. "Pureblood," he announced, and the door opened again, allowing him to enter without saying another word to Nott. He tried to ignore Crabbe and Goyle standing in the middle of the common room, looking slightly lost. Instead, he headed straight for the dormitories. Behind him, he heard Nott call out, "There you are! I was looking for you!" Their dormitory was blissfully empty when he let the door fall closed behind him, granting him a welcome solitude. Hermione had originally asked him to linger in the common room while they were around, in case there were any emergencies. However, Draco quickly explained to her that spending time in the common room would look unnecessarily suspicious. Instead, he had agreed to drop in when their hour was up and pick up a quill he had purposely dropped under a chair as a warning for them to get going. Draco checked the clock across the room. He still had about half an hour left. Automatically, his eyes fell on the chest, where he knew the diary lay hidden. It felt strange having Harry and Weasley so close to it. He knew there was no way they would come across it. No one but him could open the chest, after all, and they had no reason to search his things in the first place. Still, the mere knowledge that they were outside, and the object that could incriminate him was in there, made him feel restless and twitchy. He sat down on the bed, pulled out A History of Magic, and started reading the chapter on the International Warlock Convention in 1289. He was halfway through it when it was time for him to do his part as the stationary Slytherin in his friend's futile spy mission. With a sigh, he got to his feet and made his way back into the common room. The usual trio of bullies was sitting in their usual spot near the fire. Nott was talking with an air of importance, while the other two hung onto every word he said. It looked almost the same as it always did. When Nott's eyes fell on Draco, a smile spread across his face. "We were just talking about you, Malfoy," Nott called out. "You and your pal Potter, and how anyone could actually be stupid enough to think he's the heir of Slytherin. As if anyone you associated with had any kind of Slytherin pride." Nott threw his head back and laughed derisively. Draco rolled his eyes and caught Goyle's gaze. He nodded once shortly, and then bent down to pick up the quill he had left earlier that day. "Fuck off, Nott," Draco said, before turning on his heels and walking back to the dormitory. Later that night, he received a letter through Hedwig. It informed him that Nott, just as he had predicted, was not the heir of Slytherin, and that Hermione was in the hospital wing after having inserted the hair of Millicent's cat into her polyjuice potion. Draco sighed as he read it, and absent-mindedly stroked Hedwig's feathers. "Now what am I going to do about that dark artifact in my possession?" Draco muttered, more to himself than to her. Hedwig just... Hermione tipped her head and hooted once, as if trying to console Draco. She remained in the hospital wing for several weeks. It turned out that transforming animals using the polyjuice potion was harder to fix than Draco had initially thought. However, Madame Pomfrey never learned the true cause of Hermione's feline features. The group was careful not to reveal their rule-breaking. The other three friends spent a lot of time with her, both to keep her company and to bring her class notes. More often than not, though, Draco found himself alone at her bedside. He quietly retold detailed explanations from class, or did homework with her. He preferred the silence of the infirmary to the noise of the Slytherin quarters. Hermione seemed grateful for his presence, and never urged him to leave. More than once, Draco felt her keen gaze scrutinizing him. One afternoon, she finally said, "Maybe you should call it a night, Draco. You don't look well." Draco frowned. "What do you mean?" He marked the paragraph he was reading, then closed the book to focus on her. Hermione bit her lip, unsure if she should voice her thoughts. "You've been looking tired lately, as if you're not getting enough rest. It's not just because you're down here so much, is it?" Draco raised his eyebrows. "Honestly, Hermione, what difference does it make if I study here, or in my dormitory? Apart from the much more pleasant company, that is." She smiled softly, but pressed on with her questioning. "What is it, then? Were you not sleeping well?" Draco sighed, his fingers idly stroking the cover of the charms book in his lap. He was well aware that he was treading carefully with a friend like Hermione. Draco chose his words carefully, making sure not to reveal anything that could lead Hermione to the truth. "I'm worried," he finally said, "about the chamber and Harry and you." It was the easiest answer, and when Hermione nodded in understanding, he knew it was the right one. "Of course you are," she muttered. "We're all worried. I really hoped we could get some information from Nott." She paused before pressing further. "You really don't have any idea of who might be involved, Draco. It is your house that must hold the air, after all." "I told you, I'm not exactly part of any social circles with my housemates," he reminded her wearily. "If you want someone who's caught up on gossip, I'd suggest Parkinson. The woman is a nightmare, but always well informed." Hermione grimaced. "Imagine me approaching Pansy Parkinson and interviewing her about the heir of Slytherin." "It would be a sight, you have to admit," Draco said, shrugging and cracking a smile. She laughed, much to Draco's relief, and he slipped his charms book into his bag before getting to his feet. "But maybe you're right," he concluded. "I'm rather exhausted. I'll probably turn in early after dinner." "Do that," she agreed, smiling encouragingly at him. "I'll see you tomorrow." "See you," Draco waved as he made his way out of the hospital wing. As soon as the door closed behind him, his smile vanished, as if he couldn't maintain it without the presence of others. Draco knew he should be making an effort to gather information about the Chamber of Secrets so he could find a way to hand over the diary without incriminating himself further. But it had been quiet since the attack on Finch Fletchley and nearly Headless Nick, hadn't it? The last time he had tried to investigate, it had ended in disaster, and he was scared that if he took any more steps he would end up possessed again and attack another student. At that moment, only Dobby knew that the diary was in his possession. As long as everyone remained unaware and nothing else happened, was there really any need for him to act? Draco recognized how cowardly that way of thinking was. He was sure his friends would be disgusted with him. The voices in his head sounded just like them. Weasley's voice accused him of being evil and just like his father. Hermione's voice reminded him that he could not keep this a secret forever, but it was Harry's voice that affected him the most. It told him that what he was doing was plainly wrong, and that he should turn himself in before he caused any more damage. Yet, Draco's instinct for survival was too strong for him to do that. Maybe he truly was no better than his father. The next few weeks passed strangely quickly. Hermione was released from the hospital wing at the end of January. February was blissfully uneventful, not counting Valentine's Day. That day included Lockhart's ridiculous plan to chase his students with violent, ugly cherubs and an embarrassing musical Valentine's message from Ginny Weasley to Harry, which they were firmly instructed to never mention again. Draco felt he had managed to suppress the guilt and panic he carried with him. Not even Hermione seemed to notice anything odd about his behavior anymore. As time passed, the rumors about Harry quieted down as well. In fact, everything should have been perfect, or as perfect as it could be when he knew he had attacked an innocent classmate. It was towards the end of March when Professor Sprout announced that the Mandrakes had thrown a party in Greenhouse 3 suggesting they had officially entered puberty. That news sent Draco's nerves crashing down again. If the mandrakes reached maturity soon, Draco realized that the means to wake the victims from their petrification would soon be available. He had no idea how he had attacked Finch Fletchley. What if the boy had seen him and could identify him when he woke up? Draco could not let that happen. He needed to approach the teachers with some information before Finch Fletchley regained consciousness, and he could not delay any longer. He had thought about the situation repeatedly, and it became clear that his only source of information was the diary. The only way to extract that information was to write in it. Maybe, Draco considered, now that he knew what to expect, he could keep the Dark Lord out of his mind while communicating. He had learned occlumency early, so how could this be any different? One night, after running circles in his thoughts for too long, he opened the chest. Hesitantly, he drew out the dark, leather-bound notebook and settled on his bed, drawing the curtains. His hands shook as he opened the diary to a random page and picked up his quill, dipping it into the ink. He stared at the empty page for a moment before setting the quill down to write, determined despite his uncertainty. "Tell me where the Chamber of Secrets is." Draco waited as the ink sank into the page, then reappeared in the Dark Lord's script just as it had before. "Draco, I knew you would come back eventually." Draco narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath, carefully clearing his mind of emotions before continuing. "Tell me. Why? You don't need to know its location to finish the noble work of Salazar Slytherin for me, as you very well know." Draco took another deep breath, imagining a cupboard inside his mind. He sorted all his emotions carefully into it, then closed the door and locked it, just as his mother had taught him at a young age. Draco found the mental bridge useful whenever he felt overwhelmed and struggled to raise the walls he knew he could construct. "I'm not going. To finish your work, I'm going to find out where the chamber is, and then I will go to Dumbledore and hand this diary over." It took a few moments for the answer to come. "Why are you so determined to stop me?" Draco blinked, surprised by the question. "Because what you are doing is wrong. Your father never thought so, did he? I'm not like my father. Yes, you have more backbone than him. But you haven't answered my question. Not really. Why do you think what your parents taught you was wrong?" Draco took a moment to sort his thoughts. He considered his answer carefully before writing. "My friends are Muggle-born and half-blood, and I don't believe they are any less worthy of studying magic than I am." As an afterthought, he added, "I'm not going to sit by and watch you hurt them." Are these the same friends that you think won't even believe in your innocence when tested? The response hit Draco right in the stomach. Are friends who don't believe in you really worth turning your back on a family as noble as yours? "You're wrong about them," Draco scribbled angrily. "They would believe me. Harry and Hermione always believed in me. It's the rest of the world that would doubt me." "Are you so sure about that?" Draco's quill hovered above the paper. He wanted to write yes, with all his might, but somehow he could not bring himself to do it. When his answer did not come, the Dark Lord wrote, "Poor boy, you think you made a decision, but in truth you have always been following others, desperate for recognition and love. First it was your father, and now Harry Potter has twisted your mind with his talk of right and wrong, good and bad. You're trying so hard to fit yourself into that shape he drew out for you. Doesn't it get tiring, always chasing after people who never see you for who you really are?" "Are you serious?" Draco's heart was racing as he slammed the diary shut. "It's not true," he whispered to himself. "Don't let him get to you. He just wants you to lose your head." Yet his words did nothing to calm his racing heartbeat or ease the pain that felt like a vine wrapping around his chest, making it hard to breathe. Draco had enough on his mind over the Easter holidays, without worrying about the diary. Unfortunately, he found it impossible to concentrate on his studies or decide which electives to choose for his third year at Hogwarts. Hermione kept going on about how important the decision was, which made Draco's head spin. He tried to get guidance from Harry, But whenever he asked for his opinion, Harry only repeated whatever the Weasley family had told him. When Draco ended up choosing the same subjects as the Weasley nuisance, divination, and care of magical creatures, he felt conflicted. "I never set much store by divination," he told Hermione one afternoon at the library. "And I'm not all that good with animals either, other than owls, that is." "Well, you don't need to take the same subjects as Harry and Ron," she frowned. Draco bit his lip, hesitating before admitting very quietly, "But I'd like to have more classes with you three. It would be nice to not always sit alone in the corner, you know." He wasn't looking at Hermione when he said it, but he met her gaze when she touched his arm gently, a sad smile on her lips. "I'd like that too," she nodded. "But you shouldn't make academic decisions based on the fear of being alone." "I know," Draco sighed. "Which subjects would you like to take, then? Is there anything you're particularly interested in?" "Well," Draco began, gnawing on his lower lip, "I told you that I love alchemy, and a lot of texts on the subject are written in ancient runes," Draco said. "I can read them a little, but it's mostly self-taught. I'd like to learn it properly. Also, arithmancy fascinates me." "Both sound extremely interesting," Hermione agreed enthusiastically. "I really want to take them too. It would also be interesting to learn about magical creatures, especially for someone like me who has no experience with even the most common ones. Divination is just a completely different branch of magic that I'd like to know more about. And Muggle studies." "You grew up in a Muggle family, Hermione," Draco reminded her, laughing. "Why would you take it up at Hogwarts?" "Well," Hermione muttered, flushing, "it would be interesting to study it from a wizarding perspective." "You are incredible," he said, shaking his head. "We're supposed to choose a maximum of 3 subjects, you know." "I talked to Professor McGonagall yesterday," she shrugged. "She said if I wanted to take more, we could find a way to make it work." "Really?" Draco asked, thinking. "So that means I could take care of magical creatures, divination, ancient runes, and arithmancy?" "I think so," Hermione nodded. "I mean, it would be stressful, but I spend most of my free time studying as it is," Draco shrugged. "I think I can handle it." "Well, do it then," Hermione encouraged, sounding pleased. "It will be nice having you in most of my classes. At least you don't make fun of me for actually being interested in what we're learning." There was an edge to her voice that suggested there had been too many careless comments from Ron lately. "Oh, Harry," she perked up, and Draco raised his head to see Harry approaching their table, still in his Quidditch attire. "How was training?" "Good," Harry smiled, sitting down opposite them. "I'm sure we'll beat Hufflepuff in a couple of weeks. The team is in good form." Draco forced a smile, the idea of Quidditch seeming distant. Strange and surreal, Harry felt the weight of his worries. He knew the last match of the season against Ravenclaw was approaching. "Where is Ron?" he asked, glancing at Hermione with a questioning look. "In the common room," Hermione replied, her tone slightly stiff. He felt there was no need to start homework until a day before the holidays end. Right," Harry nodded with a grin. "How about I go up, change, pick him up, and we can head out to the lake? The weather is nice, and we can still work down there if you want." "That sounds good." Hermione smiled, but looked at Draco with concern when he made a face. "I'll stay here," Draco muttered. "It's cold." He felt Harry's gaze on him, but didn't look up. "I don't have to ask Ron to come," he finally said. "We could just go as the 3 of us." "I just don't feel like going out," Draco protested. "It's got nothing to do with Weasley." "Listen, I know you two haven't been exactly friendly since the whole Quidditch thing," Harry sighed. "But we've hung out without him before. I don't see why we can't do it anymore. You've been withdrawing lately, and I don't like it." When Draco looked up at those words, he found Harry's green eyes defiant. He could barely stand to look at him without feeling a sense of self-loathing. "I'm not withdrawing," Draco murmured. "Oh, come on, I'm not stupid," Harry grumbled. "Whenever you're with us, you look pale and tired, and you barely say a word. You don't really seek us out anymore. If anything, you spend time alone with Hermione in the library. You're my friend too, you know." "Of course I am," Draco said immediately. "I'm not avoiding you." "Avoiding might be too strong a word," Harry agreed. "But I know something is wrong. Hermione said it might be Ron's fault." Draco shot a look at Hermione, who was diligently proofreading her Charms essay, seemingly unaware of their conversation. Draco had felt uncomfortable in their presence, but it had less to do with Weasley and his low opinion of him, although that played a part. It was more about his own guilt and desperation. Hermione, despite being so smart and perceptive, was easier to be around. Harry was a different matter. Every time Draco looked at him, he felt he did not deserve to be around someone so inherently good. It felt like his hands were too dirty to touch something pure. He had tried to stay close, knowing Harry would notice if he just disappeared. He thought he had become good at pretending, but perhaps he had underestimated Harry. "Draco, listen," Harry said, drawing Draco's attention back to him. "Whatever it is that's wrong, you can talk to us, okay?" Harry looked so earnest that Draco felt even worse about himself. "Nothing is wrong," he found himself saying. Harry's eyebrows drew together in obvious doubt. "Things have just been stressful, is all." "Has not been an arse to you?" Harry asked, his jaw tensing. "No," Draco replied immediately. "I mean, not more than usual, just the whole thing with the chamber and—" "But there hasn't been an attack in months," Harry pointed out. "Things are calming down. Still, you seem to be getting worse." Draco had no ready answer for that. He just shrugged. Harry's eyes were burning into him. "I think what Harry's trying to say," Hermione spoke up at last, looking up from her essay, "is that it's better to talk to us if you're worried, instead of keeping it all to yourself. It's not doing you any good. Just, if you want someone to listen, we'll be there, okay?" "I know," he nodded, trying to smile. Harry was still looking at him wearily, but he seemed resolved to let the subject drop for now. With a sigh, Draco rolled up his parchment and corked his bottle of ink. "But if we're going out, I need to get my coat," he said. "It really is cold." Harry chuckled. "Do that. I will meet you in the entrance hall in 15 minutes. When Draco caught up with them again after a trip to the dungeons, Harry had indeed left Weasley behind. Under normal circumstances, he would have felt valued by that. Now, he just felt worse. "Tell me where the chamber is," Draco scribbled onto the empty page that very same night, driven by his guilt. "No more games." The ink sank into the page and formed new words immediately. "Maybe I like games. I'm a memory, Draco. Time isn't as much of a matter for me as it is for you. I'm prepared to wait you out. I'll end up going to Dumbledore, whether you tell me anything or not," Draco threatened, though he knew deep down that it was no use. "You might as well not make it worse for either of us." "You don't even believe that yourself, Draco. You're not going to tell anyone, not unless you find a way to prove your own innocence. And do you really think I'd be stupid enough to hand that to you?" When Draco slammed the diary shut again, his eyes were prickling with tears he desperately tried to hold back. Chapter 6. Something stronger than hate and fear. The morning of the Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff felt oddly blurry for Draco. He woke up feeling like his mind was on standby. He remembered going down for breakfast, but he couldn't recall arriving there. The next thing he knew, he was on his way to the Quidditch pitch. Drowsy and disoriented, he looked around. He was alone on the path to the field, hearing loud voices from the stands, but no players were in the air yet. Draco frowned, trying to remember why he was out there alone, and why he hadn't gone to the match with Hermione and Weasley. Suddenly he spotted 3 people hurrying up the path toward him. It took him a moment to recognize them. Professor McGonagall was leading the group, looking tense and distraught. Behind her, 2 Gryffindor students followed, one in normal school robes and the other in Quidditch gear. Draco froze, staring at Harry and Weasley in confusion. Behind them, more students were making their way back to the castle, but he paid them no mind. "Mr. Malfoy," Professor McGonagall's voice broke through his daze. He looked up to meet her serene expression. "Good that you're here. You better come along too." "Come where?" Draco asked, confused. She just shook her head and continued walking. Harry caught his eyes, and his expression mirrored Draco's confusion, along with fear. Silently, Draco fell into step with them, hurrying after McGonagall. "What's going on?" he whispered to Harry. Has the match been cancelled?" "Yes," Harry breathed, staring worriedly at McGonagall's back, as if the explanation for this turn of events was sewn into her robes. "Where were you?" Weasley demanded when Harry said nothing more. "Hermione ran off to the library, and you haven't shown up either. What have the two of you been up to?" Draco started, but hesitated, frowning. He struggled to remember, but could not recall anything, and his panic grew with each second. The last time he had forgotten what he was doing, just moments before, he had attacked Finch Fletchley and nearly Headless Nick. He was spared from answering when they entered the castle and soon found themselves in front of the hospital wing. "This will be a bit of a shock," McGonagall said, her voice so gentle that it made Draco's blood run cold. "There has been another attack, another double attack." Draco felt breathless as she opened the door, revealing Madame Pomfrey tending to two stiff figures on adjacent beds. One was an older Ravenclaw girl with long curly hair that Draco did not recognize. The other was Hermione. He sensed that Professor McGonagall was speaking, but he could not hear anything. All he registered was a blur of white noise. That night, Snape came down to their common room to announce the new rules following the attacks on Hermione and the other girl, whose name was Penelope Clearwater. The new curfew for all students had been moved up to 6 in the evening, and no one was allowed to leave their common room after that time. Teachers were to escort each class to their classrooms, as well as to the bathroom and the Great Hall. All club activities were suspended. Snape fixed them with a stern gaze, as he demanded that any student with information about the attack should come forward. He warned that if the culprit was not caught soon, the school would have to be closed. The mood among the Slytherins following those announcements was much graver than it had been after previous attacks. The threat of closing Hogwarts clearly made them realize the seriousness of the situation. They sat in groups after Snape left, whispering among themselves. Draco made his way back. Draco stumbled into the dormitory in a daze. Thankfully, it was empty, and no one was there to taunt him as he fell onto the mattress, staring into space. He had attacked Hermione, one of his two true friends. Hermione, who had spent the last few months worrying about him, never suspecting that he could be a danger to her. Draco's eyes stung. Weasley had been right. He was just as bad as his father. No, he was worse. He had never even acknowledged what he was, convinced he deserved to be friends with someone like Harry and Hermione, while choosing the opposite side. And yet, here he was, keeping vital information from the teachers to save himself, attacking his friends instead of acting. He pulled his knees up on the mattress and pressed his face against them, stifling the desperate sobs that tore from his mouth. The next day, news spread through the school that Dumbledore had been suspended as headmaster, and that Hagrid had been taken to Azkaban. Draco could not understand how anyone could suspect Hagrid. Hagrid was as far from the heir of Slytherin as one could be, with what he believed was giant blood in his veins and his kind, cheerful nature. People whispered about Hagrid's involvement in the first set of attacks 50 years ago, leading to his expulsion as a student. They mused that he had decided to continue the work he left off back then, but Draco did not listen to any of it, knowing firsthand that it was not true. The Dark Lord had opened the chamber 50 years ago, framing Hagrid, or perhaps using him just as he was now using Draco. Draco wished he had known about Hagrid's past involvement earlier, so he could have approached him. Maybe together they could have figured it out. Now, though, it was too late to think about it. Draco knew that. He had no choice but to tell someone. Hagrid was innocent, and he could not let him stay in Azkaban when Draco felt he was the one who should be there. But who could he tell? Dumbledore was gone. Draco had hoped the influential headmaster would understand and believe his words as one of Harry's friends. Now, that was no longer an option. Of course, he could approach McGonagall, who had been appointed as temporary headmistress. He had tried to speak with her shortly before his attack on Finch Fletchley, but would the head of Gryffindor House care enough to help him avoid possible incarceration? Would her word carry enough weight? Draco lingered after various transfiguration lessons, trying to gather the courage to ask her for a private audience. However, she always hurried them to their next class, and each time he lost his nerve. Draco had not spoken more than a few words to Harry since the attack on Hermione. They had no chance to see each other between classes, and only shared potions. Even as they sat next to each other, Draco refused to meet Harry's gaze. He knew Harry was watching him often, but he could not bring himself to look up, fearing he would break down. When Harry attempted to start a conversation, they were always interrupted by Snape. Draco felt almost thankful for those interruptions, because he didn't know what to say. This continued for 2 weeks. Day after day, Draco felt more disgusted with himself. Then, when the news spread that the mandrakes were ready for cutting, he finally forced himself to open the chest, the one Hagrid had given him. His heart clenched painfully at the realization. He withdrew the leather-bound diary. He told himself he didn't care anymore. The first teacher he found, he would approach and hand himself over. Draco could feel the dark magic emanating from the diary. "Felt you were in trouble. I came to find you." Draco blinked, still trying to process everything. "You killed a basilisk?" Harry nodded, his expression a mix of relief and urgency. "Yeah, it was a fight, but it's over now. We need to get out of here." Draco pushed himself up slowly, his body protesting against the cold and the shock. "What happened? How did we end up here?" "I'm not sure," Harry admitted. "One moment, we were in the castle, and then, I don't know. I found you here." Draco looked around the chamber again, the stone serpents looming ominously. "This is the Chamber of Secrets, isn't it?" "Yeah," Harry replied. "We need to move. There might be more danger." Draco's heart raced as he processed the implications. "What about Hermione?" "She's safe," Harry reassured him. "She's waiting outside with Ron. We just need to get you back." With that, Harry helped Draco to his feet. The warmth of Harry's hands was a stark contrast to the chill that had settled into his bones. Together they started to make their way through the dark chamber, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. The diary too. "You're safe now, Draco. Trust me." "The diary," Draco muttered. He finally spotted the leather-bound notebook lying a few feet away, within a puddle of ink. There was a large hole in it, and a big tooth lay next to it. Oh, Merlin! His vision blurred, and it took him a moment to realize it was from his own tears. "Draco," Harry whispered soothingly. The phoenix landed almost noiselessly on Draco's other side, observing him curiously. "I didn't mean to, Harry," Draco managed to say, but it was hard to speak. He was trembling violently now, and sobs racked through his chest. "I tried to stop it, I swear." "I know," Harry assured him. Then Draco found himself enveloped in an embrace. He closed his eyes, willing himself to calm down, but it was no use. All the fear, guilt, and desperation of the last few months poured out of him in tears and broken sobs. Harry's physical comfort only made it worse. "Please don't hate me," Draco whimpered. His voice sounded small and lost. Harry's arms tightened around him. "Of course I don't hate you," he insisted. "You were possessed, Draco. Voldemort made you do all this stuff. Ginny, when you were taken to the chamber, she approached Ron and me. She was crying and told us about that diary she found among her books after our trip to Diagon Alley during the summer holidays. She said it had written back to her every time she wrote in it. She mentioned that there were lags in her memory after she started using it, and that when the attacks on Mrs. Norris and Colin happened, she hadn't known what she was doing at the time. Then the diary was gone the day after that second attack. She thought she had lost it, and afraid as she was, she didn't tell anyone about it. But when you were taken earlier today, she wondered if maybe you had gotten your hands on it, and the same thing had happened to you." "My father gave it to her," Draco said through his tears. Each word felt like fire in his chest. "Dobby, he works for my family, and when you mentioned his name, I called on him." Draco took a shaky breath. "He told me," but he could not continue. Harry nodded quickly, feeling the movement against his shoulder. "I understand," Harry said gently. "You took the diary from Ginny to protect her." There was a moment of silence before he asked tentatively, "Why didn't you just tell us, Draco?" "I couldn't," Draco whimpered. "After everything Weasley said about me and my father, I... "Draco," Harry whispered. Then he pulled away to catch Draco's gaze. Draco, look at me!" Harry's eyes blazed with intensity as Draco's eyelids fluttered open, and he felt like he couldn't breathe. It felt like he was burning under Harry's attention. "I will never," Harry stressed the word harshly, "ever think that you are like your father. No matter what happens, I know you better than that." "If possible," Draco cried, even harder at those words. "But Weasley—" "Ron didn't really mean it either," Harry interrupted. "It was a stupid thing to say, and I'll have a word with him about it, believe me. But when you were taken, he was just as scared as I was. He came down here with me, actually, but he got stuck on the way with Lockhart. We'll have to go back soon. I bet he's worried sick." When Draco did not answer, Harry pulled him back into their prior embrace. "You scared me so much," Harry whispered. "I thought you were dead." "How did you find me?" Draco spoke against the fabric of Harry's robes, his face buried against the other boy's shoulder. But it seemed the Gryffindor could— "Hermione," Harry explained. "We found a note. Shortly before the attack on her, she figured out that the monster inside the chamber was a basilisk, and that it was moving through the plumbing of the school. When you were taken, we connected the dots to Moaning Myrtle and her bathroom. She died 50 years ago in that very same bathroom, you see? It was the attack Hagrid got expelled for, even though he was never involved. We wanted to tell Lockhart because he said he was going to try to get to you. That he's a coward and a liar. But never mind that now. We came ourselves in the end." Draco clung to Harry, taking deep breaths to rein in his tears. "I'm so sorry, Harry," he breathed. "I was so scared to say anything. That's why I tried to figure out where the chamber was for myself, so I could hand over all the information to Dumbledore and prove that I wasn't involved. But I couldn't. I didn't find out anything, and then—" "And then he possessed you too," Harry nodded, hugging him a little tighter. "I should have known. All these months you've looked horrible, and I never—" "How could you have known?" Draco demanded, finally pulling away from Harry to wipe his cheeks in angry motions. "When I tried with all my might to hide it, I was so stupid." "You kind of were," Harry agreed. The words stung, but when Draco looked up at him, he was smiling gently. "But it was our fault too, in a way. I know you never meant to hurt anyone. Just promise me that from now on, no matter what, you will always tell me the truth." Draco blinked, fighting against the last couple of tears threatening to fall from his eyes, and nodded once. Harry nodded too, then got to his feet. He held out a hand to help Draco up. "Right, then let's go back," Harry announced. They encountered Weasley and Lockhart a few minutes after leaving the chamber. They were making their way through a dark, damp tunnel that Draco realized he must have walked through to get there, though he could not recall it. Harry called out to Weasley when they heard the sound of shifting rocks. He pulled Draco along to where the tunnel ceiling had apparently collapsed, leaving a path of destruction blocking their way. However, there was a hole in the blockade of fallen rocks, just large enough for him and Harry to slip through individually. Weasley was waiting on the other side, looking relieved and pale. "Thank Merlin," he muttered as he caught sight of them. He reached out a hand to help Draco through the hole he had created. Draco, feeling overwhelmed, took it without a word. "Malfoy, you bloody idiot!" Weasley burst out as soon as Draco made it to the other side. "You scared us to death, mate, don't you ever—" "Ron," Harry said sharply, giving him a meaningful look as he climbed through the hole after Draco. "Drop it, will you?" Weasley flushed, looking sufficiently abashed as he muttered, "Well, I'm glad you're all right, both of you." He frowned in confusion when the Phoenix followed Harry, carrying a lump of cloth in its claws that Draco could not identify. "He's Dumbledore's," Harry said offhandedly, making Draco aware of all the plot twists he had neglected to ask about. "Is that a sword?" Weasley demanded, staring at Harry incredulously. Only then did Draco notice that Harry was carrying a silver, jewel-studded weapon along with the stabbed diary. "Later, Ron," Draco brushed him off. "For now, let's just get out of here. Where's Lockhart?" "Back there," Weasley replied, nodding further into the tunnel. Down the tunnel, they suddenly felt strangely cheerful. "He's in a bad way. Come and see." Weasley explained that Lockhart had tried to hit them with a memory charm to get rid of them on the way to the chamber. However, Using Weasley's broken wand had backfired, causing Lockhart to lose his own memory instead. Indeed, Lockhart seemed unable to recall who they were, where they were, or even who he was. Absently, Draco noted that he liked him remarkably better for it. Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix, used the incredible strength that his kind was famous for, and lifted them all the way to the second-floor girls' bathroom, where moaning Myrtle waited for them, faintly disappointed that they were still alive. They did not linger, though. After a brief moment of consideration, they made their way to McGonagall's office. As deputy headmistress in Dumbledore's absence, she was supposedly the best authority to seek out. The office was crowded when they were called inside. McGonagall stood by her desk, having been in conversation with none other than Dumbledore himself until their sudden appearance. At the fireplace sat Snape, opposite Draco's rigid-looking parents, with Dobby at their side. The shocked silence was oppressive for a moment. Then Draco's mother jumped up and crossed the room to pull him into a breathtakingly tight embrace. "Darling," she whispered. "Oh, by Merlin, are you all right? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Mother," Draco breathed, though the way he trembled under her attention betrayed his true feelings. "Potter Weasley," McGonagall spoke up weakly, directing her attention toward the students of their house. "Could you please be so kind as to explain?" Harry hesitated before crossing the room toward McGonagall's desk, dropping down the dirty bundle Fawkes had carried earlier. It was the sorting hat, Draco realized. The stabbed diary and the sword lay before them. Harry faced Dumbledore and began recounting how they had found the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets. He explained how he had discovered Draco there, and with Fawkes's help, who had provided him with the sorting hat and the sword of Gryffindor, he fought and killed the basilisk. Draco noted that he was carefully avoiding any mention of his own involvement. Dumbledore interrupted with a gentle smile and asked, "What interests me most is how Lord Voldemort managed to enchant Draco when my sources tell me he is currently in hiding in the forest of Albania." Draco's mother gasped in horror, tightening her arms around her son as she turned to Harry. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her face a mix of shock and fear. "Draco?" Harry remained silent, meeting Draco's gaze. Taking a deep breath, Draco finally spoke with a trembling voice. "Maybe we should ask Father about that," he said, drawing strength from his resentment, since he was the one who handed the diary to Ginevra Weasley this summer. A tense silence followed his words. Draco's eyes found his father's at last. His father stood near the fireplace, posture stiff and jaw clenched. He looked pale, but his eyes flashed dangerously at Draco. "What exactly are you saying, Draco?" he asked, his tone controlled, despite the anger radiating from him. "Dobby told me what you did after the second attack," Draco muttered. Dobby whimpered at his words, but Draco ignored him. "And he helped me get the diary back from Ginny. Since then, I have been trying to get information from it to find out where the chamber was, so I could tell someone, but—" He paused. Draco took a shaky breath and looked up at his mother, who stared at him, clearly horrified. He then turned to meet Dumbledore's clear blue eyes. "I never meant to hurt anyone," he said urgently. "I only wanted—" "Of course you didn't," Dumbledore reassured him, his voice kind and understanding. "I never once suspected that you did, Draco. Older and wiser wizards than you have been hoodwinked by Lord Voldemort. I do not blame you." Draco felt weak in the knees, relieved to hear Dumbledore's words. His mother pulled him into another embrace, and he heard her mutter a sound of despair into his hair. "So," Dumbledore murmured, picking up the diary from McGonagall's desk and observing it carefully. "Would you like to explain to me what exactly this diary is, Lucius?" "I have no idea," Draco's father responded politely. "I have never seen it before." "Voldemort wrote in it when he was 16, Harry offered, glaring fiercely at Draco's father before meeting Dumbledore's gaze. "He told me he preserved a part of himself inside of it. When first Ginny and then Draco wrote into it, they allowed him to possess them. He made them open the chamber for him and released the basilisk into the school." "I see," Dumbledore nodded, staring at the diary in his hand. "Brilliant. Of course, he was probably the most brilliant student Hogwarts has ever seen. There was a moment of silence before he dropped the diary back on the desk and faced the rest of the room. "Mr. Malfoy should go up to the hospital wing straight away," he announced. "This has been a terrible ordeal for him. There will be no punishment. Bed rest and perhaps a large steaming mug of hot chocolate. I always find that cheers me up." He smiled at Draco. "You will find Madame Pomfrey is still awake. She's just giving out mandrake juice." "I dare say the basilisk's victims will be waking up any moment," Dumbledore said. "So Hermione's okay," Weasley exclaimed in relief. "There has been no lasting harm done," Dumbledore assured them. "Narcissa, may I ask you to accompany your son? I want to have a word with your husband. You too, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley." Draco's mother straightened herself and nodded at the headmaster. Draco caught Harry's eyes for a moment. The other boys smiled at him encouragingly before his mother led him out of the room. Chapter 7. The Honorary Gryffindor. Madame Pomfrey almost dropped the vial of potion she was holding in relief at seeing Draco. She paused in applying the antidote to the victims and guided Draco to a bed, then procured a steaming cup of hot chocolate, spiked with a few drops of calming draught. "I will be with you in a moment, dear," she said gently, a rarity for the usually impatient nurse. "Let me just finish here first." With that, she left Draco and his mother to their own devices. Narcissa Malfoy hesitated for a moment before taking a seat next to her son on the bed, placing a careful hand on his shoulder. "I'm so sorry you had to go through this, darling," she whispered. "I wished you had told me sooner so that I could have helped you." "What was I supposed to say?" Draco demanded shakily. "Mother, Father has set a legendary monster upon the school. Please help me save the Muggle-born students." His fingers clenched around the warm mug in his hands. "Would you really have helped me?" "Draco," she sighed, "there is little I wouldn't do for you, my love. And it pains me that you would think I'd agree with anything that puts your life, or those of the people important to you, in danger." Draco gulped, willing himself not to cry again. "And I'm frankly appalled that your father was willing to go to such lengths," she added, her voice turning frosty. "This is going to have consequences for him, I assure you." Their conversation was interrupted when Weasley entered the room, a cheerfully curious Lockhart in tow. "You okay there, Malfoy?" he asked hesitantly. Draco nodded wordlessly. "Good. Dumbledore sent me to bring in Lockhart. Where is Madame Pomfrey?" The nurse appeared from behind the curtains at his words, looking weary. "What has happened to him?" she demanded. "I am rather busy, you know." "His memory charm backfired," Weasley said sheepishly. "He doesn't have a clue who he is." "Oh, Merlin," Madame Pomfrey sighed, raising an eyebrow. "Well, choose an empty bed, Professor. I'll attend to you later. If your memory can be retrieved, it can wait." With that, she returned to her work on the victims, disappearing behind the curtains. Lockhart stood, smiling mildly and not moving, until Weasley pushed him onto a random bed, rolling his eyes. "I'll go up to the Gryffindor Tower," he told Draco. "Ginny and everyone will be worried sick, and it seems McGonagall is preparing a feast in celebration. You think you'll be able to come?" "Dunno," Draco shrugged, feeling strange in response to Weasley's obvious attempts at kindness. "Right," Weasley said awkwardly. "Well, I'll see you later anyhow." Draco nodded, watching as Weasley left. For a long time, he and his mother said nothing. Draco quietly drank his chocolate, feeling the warmth of the beverage and the potions spread through him. His heart rate started to slow, and he eventually stopped trembling. His mother gently traced her fingers over his back, drawing calming circles into it. Draco almost felt like himself again when his father burst through the door. Lucius's eyes were wild, and his face was flushed with fury. "We're going, Narcissa," he bellowed. He did not look at his son, focusing solely on his wife. Draco felt his mother's hand on his back freeze. "Excuse me?" she asked softly, but dangerously. "We're going," Lucius repeated sharply. "I think not," she replied. "I'd like to stay with our son, our very traumatized son, who has faced terrifying dark magic these past few months. All you're doing, as I gather." Lucius glared at her before his gaze shifted to Draco. "You have no proof that I was involved," he crowed. he said. He spat. "If I were you, I'd be careful about what you accuse my father of." "Dobby can testify to it," Draco protested immediately. "You rest your words on a filthy house elf's testimony?" Lucius scoffed, laughing shortly. "Have you learned nothing from me about how the world works, Draco?" Draco did not answer. He knew his father was right. He had no proof against him, at least none that any authorities would take seriously. "You wait until you come home," Lucius breathed. "I'll show you what happens when you try to incriminate your own father. You ungrateful—" "That is enough, Lucius," Draco's mother hissed. "I will not tolerate you speaking to my son like that." Lucius looked up at her, and they glared at each other for a long moment. The silence was broken by Madame Pomfrey, whose return Draco had not even noticed. "This is an infirmary," she reminded them snidely. "Your son has been severely traumatized. Either you stop arguing, or you leave." Lucius straightened up in a poorly disguised scramble for dignity, and left the hospital wing without a word. His mother sighed, and got to her feet as well. "I'd like to stay, darling, but I really think your father and I need to have a serious word with each other," she said grimly. "Do you think you'll be all right on your own?" "Of course, Mother," Draco nodded, setting the empty mug down on the bedside table and standing to face her. "I'm fine." "I'll write to you in the morning," she promised, leaning in to kiss his forehead. "Rest well, my little dragon." Draco smiled at the pet name, and with another kiss on the top of his head, she turned to follow after his father. Almost immediately after she left, the door swung open once more, and Harry came into the room. "Draco," he smiled, crossing the distance to him. "How are you?" "Better," Draco said honestly. "What? Did you hear what happened in McGonagall's office? Father was furious when he showed up here." "Well," Harry shrugged, "Dumbledore told him he'd find a way to hold him responsible if any other school supplies of Voldemort's found their way into innocent hands, or something like that." "Oh, and I kind of freed Dobby." "You did what?" Draco asked, taken aback. "I made your father give him a sock without realizing it. He didn't take it too well, as you can imagine." This startled a laugh out of Draco. Harry smiled, looking pleased. "Only you, Harry," Draco chuckled, shaking his head. "I'd say you quickly made your way to the top of Father's list." "Well, he's pretty much up there on mine too," Harry said lightly. "So, are you coming to the feast?" Draco frowned. The thought of walking into the Great Hall after the revelation that he had been acting, however unwillingly, as a puppet for the heir of Slytherin frightened him. "I don't know, Harry," he muttered. "I think it's best if I just stay here." "Oh, come off it," Harry pleaded. "It wasn't your fault. There's no reason for you to hide." "But Dumbledore said I should stay here, remember?" Draco pointed out. "I'm sure he'd agree that you need some distraction," Harry insisted. "Madame Pomfrey?" There was a short discussion with the nurse, who seemed unwilling to let Draco go without a proper check-up. However, she eventually relented, conceding that she had her hands full with the treatment of the basilisk's victims. She advised Draco to come back the moment he felt poorly, and sent them on their way. When they arrived at the entrance hall, students were already filing into the Great Hall, still dressed in their pajamas and chattering loudly. A group of redheads broke through the masses, approaching them quickly. Weasley, his little sister, the twins, and the prefect. Draco noted their arrival. Ginny's eyes were red and swollen, as if she had been crying for hours. Suddenly, Draco wanted to run. He felt unprepared to face almost the entire Weasley family, after his father had tried to drive their youngest into death at worst, or into criminality at best. He came to a sudden halt, and Harry's hand flew to his arm in response. "Draco!" Harry began. "Harry! Malfoy!" Weasley called. "Thank Merlin you are here! We were just wondering if Madame Pomfrey would let us all into the hospital wing." "Are you all right, Draco?" Ginny asked in a small voice, her tearful eyes fixed on him. Draco was at a loss for words. His heart pounded loudly in his ears, and for a moment he felt dizzy. However, Harry still had a firm grip on his elbow, and was watching him closely before turning to the Weasleys and speaking for him. "He's still in shock, but he's not hurt," Harry declared. "Thank Godric for that," the prefect said quietly. "We've got to thank you, Draco, mate," one of the twins said seriously, clapping Draco on the shoulder while the other nodded vigorously. Draco's head spun, unable to process their words. He blinked, staring at them in confusion. "What?" he finally managed to say, his voice rough. "You saved our little sister," the first twin pointed out. "Without you, it would have been her down there in the chamber," the second twin added. "Not only that," the prefect said, his face pale as he looked at his trembling sister, for once without his usual arrogance. "Who knows how well she would have been able to fight the power of this diary? She might not have survived it. We owe you big time," the twin, still holding on to Draco's shoulder, concluded, giving him a gentle squeeze. "But," Draco breathed, still not understanding. "I attacked people. You should all hate me," Draco said. "Come off it," one of the twins replied, his eyes widening. "We don't blame Ginny, and we won't blame you." "You couldn't help it," Ginny said softly, catching his eyes hesitantly. "None of us could." Her words settled the storm of guilt and self-directed hate inside him. Maybe it was because she, unlike anyone else, understood exactly what he'd gone through. Draco nodded at her, unable to speak. He felt Harry's hand move from his elbow to the small of his back in a gesture of comfort. "Come on," the first twin smiled, squeezing Draco's shoulder once more before letting go. "Let's get to the feast and stuff our faces." "Yup," the other twin nodded decisively, dropping an arm around Ginny's shoulders. "And you're sitting with us today, too." "But," Draco muttered, frowning, "I'm a Slytherin." "Who cares?" Weasley said, with feeling, though he was not looking at Draco. "I think we can make an exception to the rules just for tonight," the prefect said stiffly. "We declare you an honorary Gryffindor," one of the twins called cheerfully. "Right, Fred?" "Yup," the other twin, Fred, Draco remembered, smirked. "Whoever has a problem with it can come have a word with us." Draco turned to look at Harry, hesitant, but Harry was smiling brightly. "Let's go," he told Draco. With nothing productive to say, Draco just nodded and followed the Weasleys into the Great Hall. The feast passed in a blur. Students either stared at Draco as though he were a flying Kneazle, or attempted to strike up a conversation with him, before being quickly and resolutely shut down by Harry or a member of the Weasley clan. Dumbledore addressed the students, informing them of what had happened while giving as little detail as possible, was diplomatically possible, awarding Harry and Ron 200 points each for their house. At some point during the night, the recently revived victims of the basilisk attack began to filter into the hall, each one appearing shaken and lost to varying degrees. Draco tried to avoid their gazes, feeling too guilty to do so. However, when Hermione rushed into the hall and enveloped Harry in a tight hug, congratulating him and Ron for figuring things out on their own, Draco felt his heart drop. He focused intently on his mostly untouched plate, wishing he could make himself as small as possible. He thought fleetingly about Harry's invisibility cloak, wishing he had it because he couldn't face Hermione after what had happened. Hermione, however, gave him no choice. After releasing Harry, she wrapped her arms around Draco's shoulders, hugging him tightly from behind. "I'm so sorry we didn't figure out what was going on, Draco," she whispered in his ear. "I'm so sorry we didn't help you, and that you felt like you couldn't confide in us." "What are you talking about?" Draco muttered, his voice breaking. "It's my fault, all of it. I was too much of a coward to speak up and stupidly convinced that I could handle this by myself. It's because of my big head that you got petrified. You shouldn't—" "Don't you dare blame yourself, Draco," she said, her tone unexpectedly sharp. She released him and squeezed between Ron and Draco, locking eyes with him fiercely. "You're as much of a victim as anyone who got attacked." When Draco stared at her in shock, she continued more gently. "I know what you're thinking, Draco, but please don't. I know you'd never hurt anyone intentionally, much less me. You are not your father, and we know that better than anyone. Right, Ron?" She turned to Ron for support. Draco turned his head towards Weasley, whose ears had turned almost as red as his hair. "Right," he muttered. "Right," Harry agreed. "So the next time anything happens, please trust us, okay? We've got your back." "I hope very much that there won't be a next time," Draco said weakly. "Oh," Hermione sighed darkly. Sadly, I am convinced there will be. It was around 3 in the morning when Hagrid returned. Azkaban had obviously not done him any good, for he looked pale and tired. However, his smile was bright and sincere when he directed it at Draco. "Ah, don't you worry about it, kiddo," he said, shrugging off Draco's apology. "So, we've both been had by him. Can't blame you for something that happened to me first, now can I? And thanks to you kids, everyone now knows I'm innocent." His face turned serious at those words. "If anything, I should thank you for clearing my name." Draco did not feel like he deserved any forgiveness, much less gratitude. However, the intensity of the fierce Gryffindor loyalty surrounding him made it clear that questioning the honesty of his friend's sentiments would be foolish. He pushed his guilt back into the far corners of his mind and let himself bask in their acceptance, as the celebrations continued through the night. The few remaining days of the term allowed Draco to slowly piece himself back together, bit by bit. The end-of-term examinations had been cancelled, and while Hermione despaired over that particular announcement, Draco felt grateful. He believed he wouldn't have performed up to his own standards in them anyway. Instead, Draco spent as much time as he could with his friends, not only because Harry refused to let him leave his side unless absolutely necessary, but also because he was beginning to feel almost normal again. News soon reached Draco that his father had been sacked as a school governor. This, naturally, was it was field day for Nott, who gleefully declared that Draco continued to ruin the Malfoy name. He claimed that soon Draco's family would be on the same level as the Weasleys. Draco had expected nothing less from Nott and was not particularly bothered by his words. With everything else weighing on him, Nott's bullying and his family's reputation were low on his list of concerns. However, what surprised him was that, unlike Nott's usual taunts, these comments did not resonate with some of their classmates. Zabini demanded, without any interest in his voice, "Stop being an obnoxious git. Can't you see I'm reading?" Parkinson, quite pink in the face, muttered her agreement to Zabini's words. Her eyes met Draco's for a moment, but before he could identify the emotion in them, she jumped up and fled the common room with some weak excuse about searching for Daphne. Draco was unsure how to interpret these events, so he pushed them out of his mind and avoided his housemates as usual. His mother, in one of the many letters she had sent since following her husband out of the hospital wing, assured him that his father would not bother him when he returned for the holidays. Yet Draco remained unconvinced. It wasn't that he doubted his mother's ability to stand her ground, but rather that the entire evil diary incident had shattered his faith in Lucius Malfoy as a parental figure. Ever since receiving the mysterious letter from the future, his respect for the father he once admired had diminished drastically. Now, Draco realized he would put nothing past him, a notion that was both disheartening and unsettling. Naturally, his mood was dull as they rode the Hogwarts Express back to London, despite the racket the Weasley twins and their friend Jordan were making in the corridor outside their compartment. Harry, disregarding his own bleak outlook for the summer with his return to his Muggle relatives, Draco tried his best to stay positive. He knew Harry was doing it to lift his spirits. At one point, Harry handed them all a piece of paper with a hastily scribbled number, instructing them to call him. Draco had no idea what that meant, but Hermione promised she would explain Muggle ways of communication in her first letter. "We'll manage to talk this summer," Harry promised. "We'll find a way." Draco nodded, hoping he was right. Another summer without a word from Harry seemed like a worse prospect than returning to live under the same roof as his father. So, with Harry's mysterious number in his pocket and a tight hug in parting, Draco joined his mother to return to Malfoy Manor. "Don't look so worried, darling," she gently scolded when she saw his face. "It will be fine." Draco smiled weakly at her, and with one last look toward his friends, they left platform 9 3/4 and departed for Wiltshire.